Thank you. Yes, thank you. Well.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to ask everybody to please take a moment to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And when we have completed the pledge, remain standing, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which is to stand one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Stay standing, please.
Take a moment of silence for our first responders and especially this weekend for our veterans.
Thank you, everybody. Have a seat. And there are seats that are in here that you can come in and fill in. Okay, thanks for coming out. It's nice to see people in the room. And I'm going to, I've called the meeting to order. We've done our pledge and this meeting is being recorded via Zoom. The recording will be uploaded later to the Township's YouTube channel. And under the chairman's report, the board met in executive session this evening prior to the meeting to discuss legal matters. The Municipal Authority, Pipeline Task Force, Conservancy, and Futures Committee are looking for new members. Please reach out online or directly to Derek Davis. Under public hearings, I'm going to turn this over to, is that okay? Can I have the chief come up first real quick? So Chief Burnett, would you come on up and give us the report for the month, please? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start with some statistical information first. During the month of October, there were 1,651 calls for service. Year to date for all three townships, there's been 12,040 calls for service. To put that in perspective, that was a 58.6% increase over October of 2019 with regard to calls for service. And with regard to 2019 year to date, it's a 19% increase in calls for service. With regard to East Goshen specifically, there was an 82.3% increase in calls for service in October of 2022 compared to 2019. And year to date, there's been a 21% increase in calls for service. So what that means is that during the pandemic, we had a lull, kind of quieted down a little bit. We are not only back to our pre-pandemic levels, we are higher, specifically in East Goshen. We'd like to invite everybody to go to our website to see not only crimes, arrests, open cases, but also the community engagement events that we do. We are finishing up One Warm Coat. We've been doing this for at least 10, 15 years, and we invite residents to drop off gently used and new coats, hats, scarves, etc., so that everybody is warm this winter. We're doing Bluebeards for charity, and there's 5 charities that's on our website. Very good charities, everything from breast cancer support to supporting children who've been the victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And we're also participating in Toys for Tots, which is always a popular campaign. With regard, I'm just going to do a quick synopsis of what happened in East Goshen in the month of October. 25 disturbances, 1 arrest. 11 theft investigations, 1 receiving stolen property, 3 thefts from motor vehicles, 6 unclassified thefts, and 1 retail theft, which had an arrest. An aggravated assault, a rape investigation, 3 child abuse investigations, 1 drug-related investigation that involved an arrest, 14 fraud investigations, 1 missing adult investigation where the person was located, 3 vandalism investigations, 1 forgery investigation, 2 trespassing investigations, 1 with an arrest, terroristic threats investigation at East Goshen Elementary, and 1 weapons investigation. Any questions? Yes, sir. We have a lot of thefts from vehicles. We have a lot of lost property in the park, but I wouldn't say that it was particularly a hot spot for the township.
Like how many people there are.
Chief, when I was out in front of our development today, and as a chance would have it, a police car, patrol car had pulled up across the street on the edge of the Villages of Hershey's Mill, and I thought I'd walk over and wish them well and say hello. And as I got closer, I could see it was a West Whiteland Township police car. So I engaged Sergeant Cockerham, and I said, I don't think you're lost, but I thought it was going to be one of our WEGO officers. And he said he was investigating theft of packages, which you've talked about in the past from people
Right.
delivered, Amazon, UPS, et cetera, from a property right on Green Hill Road. So more of this kind of theft occurring in all hours of the day. So that was why he was in the vicinity to interview the resident. And I don't know the extent from there, whether you've had any coordination, but it just reminded me of what you've been sharing with us. Lock your cars when you're in the driveway, don't leave the keys in them, et cetera, et cetera. To avoid putting checks in the mail with the mailbox flag up
Right.
because of the issues of check washing. Certainly packages being lifted from properties, et cetera. So you've been sharing all these matters, and today was an example where it was, right on our front door, if you will, with an active investigation.
Yeah, porch pirates is the catchy name that everybody uses to refer to them. But the bottom line is stolen packages, especially as the holidays start to approach. The best thing is neighbors keeping eye out for neighbors and also having good camera systems.
And people can go to crimewatchpa.com, WeGoPD, and sign up if they wish to register their Blink or their Ring camera, whatever device they might have, Xfinity. They can be registered so that it can be potentially used to help solve some of these porch pirate crimes. So it's also really great to keep an eye on what's going on in the community. Crime Watch does provide some really great information.
We do detailed police blotters so that you can know whether it's happening on your street and exactly what's happening. There's a summary of each major offense that we respond to.
Warm coat ends tomorrow, so the box will be picked up tomorrow afternoon, evening, the next day.
We'll give a couple extra days just
Okay.
in case.
So if anybody wants to drop off a warm coat or clothing, specifically the hats, scarves, and coats, would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Anything?
Thanks, Chief.
I don't think so. Thanks so much, Chief Bernard. Thanks for coming. And Bill, do you want to, is Grant here too? Oh, there he is. Grant, why don't you come on up and give us a rundown for Goshen, and then we can pop back up to the conditional use hearing. Thanks for coming.
So for the month of October, the Goshen Fire Company responded to 54 fire and rescue calls, 39 fire police calls, and 407 EMS calls. In East Goshen Township, there were 16 fire calls, 14 fire police responses, and 192 EMS calls. So for the year, total calls in East Goshen Township are up about 5%. That's driven primarily by EMS calls, which are up 7% for the township and 17% overall. We are on track to run approximately 4,500 EMS calls this year, which is a huge increase over last year. It's going to be probably 600 call jump from last year.
But that's partially because of that third unit
it's
that you've.
Yeah,
put
it's
in
the power
place.
truck that's running during the day to pick up the third call in our district.
Right.
Fire calls are slightly lower than last year, but the automatic fire alarm rate continues to be slightly above normal at about 52%. So that's the majority of our calls.
Okay.
In terms of fire company activities for October, obviously Fire Prevention Week, Fire Prevention Month for us. We had 17 sessions that we held at daycares, preschools, so forth. We held our open house on Friday, October 14th. It was a pretty well attended. We were competing with the Phillies at that point, but we had pretty good turnout. We are continuing with our buffet breakfast. We have another one the last Sunday of this month.
On the 27th then?
27th, yes. And our 15-week club raffle is in week 10, so that's 2/3 of the way through. And then our EMS subscription mailing will go out just after Thanksgiving. So if anybody wants an EMS subscription for 2023,
Okay.
just keep an eye on your mailbox.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
Grant,
Grant?
yeah, I'd like to ask if I might, as I look on the Goshen Fire Company monthly automatic alarm report, I see a couple of addresses, properties here. One, calls in 2022, there are 8. Calls last 12 months, 11. Another one with 6, one with 5, couple with 5. Does this, and maybe it's Derek, does this kick in our ordinance for exceeding the number of calls for false alarms, et cetera, where it goes into a fine situation?
Yes, I think, yeah, we have to evaluate each one as it comes up, but I think this year, where we at, Dave, like 6,000-ish for fines, somewhere around there, 5 to 6. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the administration of that's going on, I just.
Yeah, but it really is evaluated on an as case basis.
Yeah, understand, and so it should be.
And those fine fees are passed through to the fire department, are they not?
Yes.
Fire fees that are
Yes.
collected?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we work closely with the codes department. And
Okay,
and
good.
when they jump on it, it usually stops the problem.
All right, good. Thanks, Grant.
Great. Thank you so much for coming.
No, I appreciate it.
Grant. Have a good evening. Okay, so we're gonna pop back up to public hearings and do you want to take over?
I
then,
can do
Bill?
that.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bill Chrisman. I'm the Township Solicitor. It's nice to see everyone this evening. The first hearing that we will open is the application of Grove Meadow Developers LLC for conditional use approval pursuant to section 240-36 of the Township zoning ordinance in order to develop the property located at 1010 Hershey Mills Road with 15 single-family residential lots under the single-family open space development ordinance. And I've already addressed this with a few people who are here in the room this evening, and I see the applicant's counsel, Allison Zara, is here with us as well. I believe the applicant will be requesting a continuance from tonight's hearing. Is that correct, Ms. Zara?
Good evening. Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chrisman.
Okay, and that is to a continuance to January 17th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the applicant agrees to that continuance.
Yes.
So we will continue this hearing on the record, which means this is the only notice that will be sent out or that anyone will receive to the new date for this hearing. We're not going to send out new notices. It will not be published in the newspaper again. The only notice that the public will receive that this is continued to January is this hearing right now. And we do have a court reporter here who has stenographically recorded that as well. It is January 17th, 2023 at 7 p.m. here in this room. Not this evening, no.
It will also be posted on our website though, correct? Derek, it will also be posted on our web.
I will,
webpage.
it's on the website
calendar.
now. I will update that and sorry to make this amendment, but I probably will post it on Facebook
That's fine.
and social
That's fine.
media
That's
and
fine.
and next
good.
door and things of
Alright,
that
good.
nature. So I know you're talking about the official
Legal.
legal advertisement.
All right, okay, good. Thank you.
Right. Okay,
Very
thank
good.
you, Ms. Zaro.
Thank you very much.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
See you later.
And with that, we will close the record for that hearing for this evening to reconvene in January.
Okay.
The next hearing on tonight's agenda is a hearing on the proposed noise and nuisance ordinance that this board has discussed for many, many months now. The way this hearing will go, I will admit a couple exhibits into the record first. Then we will grant the board the opportunity to provide any comment if they so choose. Then we will turn it over to public comment for any comments on the draft agenda, if there are any. And then we will close the record and the board will render a decision on this ordinance. Before I begin, I would like to state that, as I mentioned previously, there is a court reporter here this evening who is stenographically reporting everything that is said. So if you do wish to provide any comments to the board, we ask that you come forward to this microphone next to me, clearly state your name and address, and speak slowly and clearly so it makes her job a little bit easier. One other ground rule, and this is the one that's usually tough in situations like this, people tend to get a bit conversational when talking in public meetings like this, but we need to make sure that we don't interrupt each other or talk over each other and that one person is speaking at a time. Kara can only write down what one person is saying, so we want to make her job a little easier. So with that, I'll go into the board exhibits and then I'll talk a little bit more about what the exhibits are in a minute. Exhibit B1 is a copy of the draft ordinance. Exhibit B2 is a copy of the public notice for tonight's hearing. Exhibit B3 is a proof of publication of that public notice in the Daily Local News, which was published on October 31st and November 7th, 2022. Exhibit B4 is a correspondence from Bill Geyer at 1560 Tanglewood Drive, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Exhibit B5 is a memorandum from zoning officer Dwayne Brady stating that the planning commission voted 4-1 to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the ordinance. And finally, exhibit B6 is the Chester County Planning Commission review letter reviewing this ordinance, and that is dated October 26th, 2022. Now, I will note, we do have those exhibits up on the screen. I also have 3 or 4 copies of those exhibits in hard format. If there's anyone that wants one, I'll put those at this podium for now. Basically, just to give a brief overview of what we're doing here. The board, many months ago, I think way back in the spring, decided it was appropriate to start looking at the noise and nuisance ordinances that the township had and try to revamp them. So that way they were a little bit easier to enforce and codified them outside of the zoning ordinance. A lot of your noise and nuisance regulations were in 3 different places throughout the township's code. So this was an attempt to make sure it's all in one place, easily found, easily readable, and easily enforced. So this ordinance does just that. It pulls everything out of your zoning ordinance, which is not necessarily an appropriate place for noise regulations, and makes it a standalone ordinance that is enforceable through the violations and penalties as listed in the draft ordinance. It's gone through many iterations. We've talked about it here quite a few times, but I would like to, as I mentioned, Exhibit B4 includes a couple of questions from Mr. Geyer, who asked that this be admitted as an exhibit tonight. And I thought it'd be appropriate to address a few of his questions before we turn it over to public comment. Hopefully that can stem some of the questions or concerns that people may have. So I think that's probably the right spot, Derek. I'm not sure if everyone can read that, but I'm not gonna necessarily read it verbatim and answer, verbatim. Mr. Geyer, if there's any questions you have after this, you're free to come up and ask them. But the first question, or the first couple questions, relate to the number of waivers permitted. So the ordinance contemplates that a property owner can come to the township and request a waiver from the noise regulations if they meet certain criteria. And the board determined that 4 waivers per year was the appropriate number. And Mr. Geyer asked,
Bill, right, just to amend that, right now, there is no limit on how many you can request.
right,
So there was
Yes.
contemplating a cap on the amount of noise waivers for mostly special events that you can request.
right, yes, thank you, Derek. So it is a cap at 4, and there was a question about what about rain dates and what happens if something is canceled? And there is a provision in the waiver section that says that you can get a waiver for up to 30 days. So that is if you're holding a carnival or something like that, as you can get 1 waiver for up to 30 days. And so I think in this situation, if there was an event that would likely violate the noise ordinance and a waiver is obtained and it is canceled and rescheduled for a rain date that was supplied to the township, that would still count as 1 of the waivers instead of being 2 waivers, as long as it's within that 30-day period. And then there's a question about how do you meet the requirements for a waiver? And the requirements are really a balancing test. Could you scroll up a little bit, Derek? I'm not there. To 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the requirements to determine whether someone is entitled to a waiver. And frankly, these are lifted from your existing ordinance. These are not new waiver parameters. These are what are currently in place and have been working, I believe, for some time. So it's the township's job to weigh really the benefit and detriment to the property owner who's requesting the waiver, and to weigh the impact it may have on neighbors and determine, is this really a public nuisance? And that's what I really want to stress this evening. This is an ordinance regulating public nuisances that are nuisances to the public at large. This does not stop a private property owner from having a private nuisance action that they could file themselves against a neighbor who's too loud or is violating any of the other provisions. This is just what the township determines to be a nuisance to the public at large, not any individual property owner. I think that really answers most of the questions on both pages. I didn't go over it verbatim. I tried to paraphrase as much as I could. I'm sure if I missed anything, Mr. Geyer is free to come up and ask further questions. But that's sort of an overview. And also, we talked a lot about noise right now. This also codifies nuisances for the township, including bamboo and some other invasive species that the township did not previously regulate, but that a lot of municipalities in southeastern Pennsylvania are beginning to regulate as well. So I said a lot.
I'd like to add to that, if I may.
Please.
I go back a little bit longer than Bill does. And I want to speak to the genesis of the whole ordinance. I don't know how many of you remember the pipeline coming through our township. We tried to use the noise ordinance 3 times that I know of to stop the pipeline. We failed the first time. The second time, it went back and forth. And the third time, the Sunoco company put up the baffle walls so that the decibel level wasn't readable outside, and we were not able to use the noise ordinance. One of the last things that Rick Smith did was to come up with the idea that we should bolster the nuisance ordinance in case another pipeline came along, in case one of the pipelines that exists wanted to dig it up, renovate it, repurpose it, etc. So the purpose initially of what we were doing here had nothing to do with the noise ordinance. I know that's the issue now, but originally it had to do with the nuisance ordinance so that we could set it up so that we would have some sort of a defense if another pipeline came along. That's all I wanted to say. That's my recollection of the history.
Thank you for clarifying that too, John.
So do any other board members have comments or questions? Derek, the only question I have, I don't have an ordinance number. Do you know what the next ordinance number will be? So that way when we,
G.
thank you.
Gee, what? Gee whiz?
G one,
Oh, the entire thing is 20, well,
think about it and then
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
get back to it at the end of public comment.
Bill, I want to ask you, and to, for our residents in attendance tonight, the removal of these regulations from the zoning ordinance simplifies future amendments to the ordinance.
Yeah, Mike, that's a
as
great point.
legislative document now, not a zoning document. Would you
Yep.
explain that for the folks? So they know
Absolutely.
what that might be if we, these are always dynamic, these ordinances, so they're always subject to change and amendment, so please.
Yep, absolutely, Mike. That's a great point, and I did intend to discuss that and failed to do so. So thank you for bringing that up. So the reason that this has turned into what it has, that we have a court reporter here, not that we don't enjoy Kara's presence, but the reason we have a court reporter here this evening and the reason that this ordinance was reviewed by your Township Planning Commission and by the County Planning Commission and was advertised in the newspaper multiple times is because it is amending your zoning ordinance. And a zoning ordinance is a special ordinance that you have that by state laws, to change it, you're required to go through all of those procedures. By removing this from the zoning ordinance, this will be a standalone ordinance that will simply require board approval of a draft at a public meeting, 7 days advertising and adoption. No need for another hearing. It of course will still be done in the public, but it doesn't need to go through the extensive procedures and expensive procedures of amending a zoning ordinance. So it will be a lot easier to amend going forward.
Bill, to answer your question, 129-G-2022.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else from the board before we turn it over to public comment?
Yes, Bill, didn't these additions, didn't we also impact the time where construction can stop? Did we change the times for that as well?
I believe it was tightened up a little bit. Let me see, I have your previous ordinance here. Let me.
Yeah, I feel like we had tightened it up.
It
a little
was,
bit
it
further
was,
than that,
I think it was 10 at night. It was originally 10 at night, and I think.
That's correct. Yep.
And we made it 7 PM
7.
because I think
For
that's then from Sunoco doing some work. 9, 10 at night, and that
Right.
was sort of an issue for everybody.
Yeah, that's correct. And you do break it up by receiving land use category, and you only tighten it up for residential property. So the property that is receiving the noise, if it is residential, you tightened it to 7 AM to 7 PM, whereas it was 7 AM to 10 PM.
Is it worth a value, Bill and fellow supervisors to at least list the exceptions to the noise limits? It's A through J. They're really kind of bullet points, but is that worth just sharing so that our residents at least know what those exceptions are at this moment? Obviously, you're not going to recall them all, but at least you'll hear them.
Sure, and Derek, if you could, it's on page 4 of Exhibit B1.
Yeah, thank you for, 156-4 exceptions to noise limits.
Yeah, so the following are determined regardless of the time and decibel level are not nuisances. And those are devices used to alert persons to the existence of an emergency, noise associated with emergency work to provide required utilities when public health or safety is at risk, noise caused by the operation of snow removal or other emergency equipment, handheld power tools and yard maintenance equipment on residential property between 7 AM and 9 PM, noise caused by construction activities between 7 AM and 7 PM, noise attributable to agricultural operations, public events authorized by the township, noise from trains, the unamplified human voice, and events which have received a waiver through the process that we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Thank you, thanks.
Bill, do we need to have a motion on the table before we open it to public comment?
You do not.
All right, then, anybody else up here on the board, any questions or clarification? We're good? All right, so then I guess, Bill, you can,
Yep. Any public comment, you're free to come on up to the podium. And like I said, please state your name, first and last name, and your address, please.
and as a reminder, no back and forth, please.
So Bill and Margie Geyer, 1560 Tanglewood Drive. So Bill, I did actually have, you went through the exhibit of our questions. I did actually have some additional questions to clarify what you were. So I mean, we had prepared a statement here, but some of it depended on understanding the nature of the responses to the questions that we had. So I'll read the statement first and then we can take it from there. So
You may have to speak, Bill, you have to speak a little closer.
is that better? Okay, sorry. So we provided feedback to the board on several occasions over the past few months. The public listening might wonder why the Geyers are so interested in the noise ordinance. The reason is we live next to a concert venue. Our home is in the Hershey Mill Estates residential neighborhood, has about 140 homes. Living next to a concert venue really impacts our quality of life. It impacts the peaceful enjoyment of our own home and property. The purpose and intent of the ordinance is to protect these things. That authority comes from the township. Here are our concerns with the current draft ordinance. The limit of 4 annual waivers is too many. A limit of 1 or 2 per year is reasonable to accommodate one-off graduation parties or special anniversaries where someone wants loud music or live amplified bands. Decibel limits. The increase from 60 to 65 decibels is an almost doubling of sound intensity. It's not insignificant. We had an audiology expert review the ordinance, and she not only confirmed that, but she also reiterated that low frequencies typical in music are not even measured in the A scale. The A scale is dBA. The low frequencies, these low frequency sounds are the very sounds which pass through walls and homes. Her final comment, this is going to seem and actually be a lot louder than 60 or 65 decibels if all the low pitches are ignored in the measurement. Why are the decibel limits being raised? We believe the current limits should be kept, or the township should follow the Chester County Planning Commission recommendations to use the lower limits for weekend and holidays. The county also recommended the township consider adding the C scale measurements to measure the more disruptive bass sounds. That's the low frequency. Regarding the 14-day request period to the township, milestone celebrations are typically planned much further than 14 days in advance. Requesting of 14 days in advance leaves impacted residents about a week to potentially rearrange their plans to quietly enjoy their property. Impacted residents should have a longer notification period. And then we'd like to propose the ordinance language has some more precise wording regarding the waiver request. And with that, I'll let Margie add a few comments.
Thank you.
So from the section about waivers, it says no more than 4 times in any calendar year, applicants may request a waiver. This fails to indicate if the waiver can list multiple dates, which current waivers have, is per person or per address, if it can be obtained by another resident for a different address, if rain dates may be specified, what happens if both the original and rain date have inclement weather? Does that count against the 4 limit? Just would request that more specific information be laid out in the ordinance. It's very vague, which is why the current noise ordinance has no limits versus what the previous noise enforcement officer said, oh yeah, people only ever have 1 or 2 private events, but not in our case. Also, this J that's listed here, so the private events for which a waiver has been granted means anybody in the township who gets one of these waivers can generate as much noise as they want to. And anybody who's impacted by that can't claim insult. So, and even if the decibel level is 65, this clears it from that. You know, it's putting private events in the same category as emergency road service or snow clearing or things that don't last hours or 30 days, which is what the noise ordinance allows. So respectfully request that more details be actually specified so that there isn't any kind of vague interpretation or reinterpretation in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Margie.
Thank you.
I like the idea of tightening it up a little bit as well. I've had some concern about this J category as well. Because the way I read it is the way the Geyers have interpreted it. And that's to say that if I choose to have a party, I can go ahead and make as much noise as I want to because I've got a waiver. So we're not restricting the decibel level for the person who's requested the waiver. We still need to have some restriction, I think, there. Am I making myself clear?
I understand
Is
what
that-
you're saying. I
okay.
will say that in the waiver section, it does permit the township to include reasonable conditions on the yeah, it may contain conditions and restrictions in order to ensure that the intent of the chapter is implemented. So when the permit is issued, the township can certainly state if the board were to direct, you know, not to exceed certain decibel
Okay.
levels or that sort of thing. I also do want to stress the fact that even if a waiver is obtained, there is still a right of private nuisance that a property owner can sue their neighbor for,
Okay.
or sue anyone who's violating
Okay,
their private enjoyment of their property. So this is just what would become a violation of the law. Whereas if someone else is conducting a private nuisance to you, this does not affect your right to sue them.
okay.
Bill, the statement was made, and I don't know if it's accurate legally or not, at a prior discussion of this, that people, if they thought the noise was too loud or too raucous, they could still call the police. Is that accurate?
It sure is. This ordinance explicitly gives the police the ability to enforce the noise provisions.
Thank you.
Please come on up, sir.
Thank you.
Please make sure to speak directly into the microphone.
Sure. Frank Morgan, 1704 Clock Tower Drive. I'm requesting that the board consider exempting the use of a private residential backup generator during a blackout emergency or when it's necessary. They are allowed but they are necessary during those periods of time.
Would that fall under emergency equipment?
Would that be under
Yeah.
exemptions to the noise limits, 156.4 C?
Yes, it
Noise
would.
caused by the operation of snow removal and other emergency equipment.
Okay,
Frank,
I took that to mean operated by the township or whatever, as opposed to a private use.
No, as if you had
Private
your own
as
snow
well.
blower and were operating it at midnight because of the conditions, you would be exempt.
You'd be
from
exempt,
that kind of a nuisance. if
We
you will.
explicitly had that conversation about private snow blowers, and we might even mention generators, but we definitely had that conversation.
So I think it covers it. I mean, that's a catch-all. Clearly, it doesn't specifically state it, but I think that there's certainly is an understanding amongst the staff. Dwayne Brady is here.
I don't think that we're gonna have any police officers who are going to show up at your door at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, shut your generator off.
Gotcha.
And in fact, I will state that an original version of this did state noise caused by the township's operation of snow removal and other, like you had mentioned, and other emergency equipment, and the township provision was taken out, so it does
So
apply
it
to everybody.
generalized it across the board.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's good. Okay.
Thanks for bringing that,
Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks for
Appreciate
bringing that
that.
up. If anybody else has any other comment or question, please come over to the wall over here so that you can get in line. Hello, sir.
Ed Coyle.
Hello, Ed Coyle, 1410 Cooper Circle. I'd just like to echo Bill Geyer's request that the limit on exemptions or waivers be limited to 2 as opposed to 4. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr.
Thanks,
Coyle.
Ed.
Come on up.
Ken Flanagan.
Ken Flanagan, 602 Marydale.
Please speak into the microphone, Kenan. Thank
Sure.
you.
I think overall, this ordinance is good. It's been a long time coming. It's an improvement. That said, I'm going to ask that you reject the ordinance, not for what's in it, but for what is not in it. Has 2 very major serious omissions. First, it fails to prohibit any noise. There's no restrictions in there. In fact, beyond prohibiting noise, it raises the acceptable noise level. 5 decibels doesn't seem like much, but that's 25% as it's heard by the ear. If you don't think that's significant, we can turn up the amplifier 25%. You'll all notice. So as baseline, we're getting more noise. We're allowing more noise rather than reducing it. And I don't think anyone here woke up in the morning and said, you know, I could use a lot more noise in East Goshen. The second aspect, the second omission is public involvement. A permit is issued, you will find out about it after the permit is issued. There's nothing up front that notifies you, gets your engagement, gets your involvement on this. That's totally missing from this. You'll be after the fact. It's a done deal.
Actually, I think that we do have the provision in here that it must be a 14-day notice to the surrounding community members. Specifically, it's a letter that goes out from the township directly to the residents. So that is provided for.
If it's interpreted that way, excellent.
If I may just amend that a little bit, it requires a 14-day application to the township. And then once the township receives the application, they're obligated to get the notices out as soon as practicable.
So right now, sort of the same thing as the waiver having no limit. Right now, there's no minimum requirement. So possibly, I mean, I've seen instances before I started as manager where there was, you know, they given 24-hour notice or something like that. So that was in order to tighten that up a little bit as well.
One additional point I'd like to make about the increased noise, which I failed to make. Once you have the waiver, as someone pointed out, there's no upper limit on how much noise that could be. Quite literally, just if I wanted to annoy people, I could bring out 140 decibel jet engine and run that, but I've got an exemption and a permit. What does that mean to you? It's a safety issue. The OSHA, if those of you who've worked in factories and aspects, recognize that there is an upper limit without hearing protection of 85 decibels. Above 85 decibels, you either have to wear hearing protection or you're going to suffer hearing loss. You can reach that 85 decibel very easily. My recommendation, once again, is that we put an upper limit on this, consider the health and safety of the neighbors around the area where it's going, because that sound is not going to respect property lines. So we look at it from that aspect. Now, with all that said, I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good on this, but there are some serious omissions in this ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenan.
Appreciate the comments.
Thanks, Ken. Madam Chair, may I ask a question real quick to Derek?
Absolutely.
Derek, how many waiver requests do we get every year, ballpark,
I mean,
or how many applicants?
applicants themselves,
Yeah.
probably 2 or 3
Okay,
on average,
a total of what, 10 waivers a year is what we're talking?
probably less.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Jim Barger, 1202 Joshua Drive. No, just Barger, Barger.
Hi, Jim.
I talk fast a lot. like some clarification on something the solicitor said. To use the word homeowner when referring to an applicant. Exactly what is, as it says here, 4 times a year, any calendar year applicants, what is an applicant specifically?
That's a good
And
question.
I'll tell you why. I'm a homeowner. My wife is also a homeowner in the same residence. Is that 2 applicants? How many applicants? So if that's the case, then 4 would be 8 if in a married household. So that's why I'm looking for some clarity on that.
I think that's a fair question and, there we go. I think that's a fair question. But I think that the township would interpret it as a property owner,
A property itself.
a property itself. Right.
That's correct. That's how I would interpret it.
Okay, and that's why I find ambiguity in this document. It's not spelled out, it's not clear. And I think that's the issue the other people are having. This document is not clear. It leaves a lot of room for interpretation. An example in item number 4, the operations will not exceed 30 days. Does that mean I can get a waiver as a homeowner and have a concert for 30 days? Because that's what that says. It's not clear. Do you agree?
I do. That is what is in the current ordinance. That is lifted directly from there and it hasn't.
Well, yes, it is, but this document, this waiver actually comes from the new language, which is J, private events for which waivers under section 507 or 156-7 has been granted. That wasn't part of that before. That's a new language. Am I clear? Am I understanding correctly? J is new language to this document.
Right, but there was always the waiver, there was always the ability to get a waiver from the noise provisions in the old ordinance anyway.
Correct.
So that wasn't necessarily
Perfect.
required at the time.
So as we're tightening things up, can we tighten that? Why doesn't that tighten up as well? Can I have a waiver for 30 days to have a concert? As it's written in this document.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's why.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
I would say that there's also some interpretation by the township when we also issue the permit. So
Right.
if somebody said they wanted to have Woodstock for 30 days, I would deny that.
Right,
Okay, well,
and
then
that
Obviously,
goes back to,
that's-
that's a good point. That
No,
goes
wait a
back to,
minute.
hold on. But that goes back to, there are balancing factors that the township has to look at. So like Derek said, if someone wanted to do Woodstock, that probably wouldn't meet those criteria, those factors that he has to look at to determine whether someone is entitled to a
Well,
waiver or not.
Yeah. And we can, I'm not suggesting the board do one thing or another, but we could also always add to this ordinance, because one thing I can't stress enough, if we don't pass it, there's less restrictions because the
Right.
noise waiver system is in place now, has been for many years with less restrictions that are in this proposal.
I have a question. Can we actually make any changes this evening?
So if you make any material changes, we would have to
Re-advertise.
Oh,
re-advertise.
that's
and
fine. Okay, I
So,
understand.
so I would recommend
if-
if you,
If we wanted to then proceed, we would have to amend it later.
I would recommend, because this is a zoning ordinance amendment, even though it's just taking it out of the zoning ordinance, it's still amending your zoning ordinance, that you pass it as it is and
Right.
make an amendment to it at a later date.
Does
Thank you.
everybody understand that? If it stays in zoning, it's hard to change. If we get it out of zoning and make it an ordinance instead, the board can change that with 7 days, is it?
7 days.
7 days
Yeah.
notice.
And public.
There's always public comment, but
Right.
the point is, one of the things we're trying to do, besides affect the nuisance ordinance, is to get this out of the zoning ordinance and get it more into the board's hands.
And another thing, I would suggest keeping an eye on the township's agendas, because this has been discussed 4 times at public meetings or so.
No
4
less.
times at the board and 2 times at the planning committee.
Right. So please make sure you keep an eye on the agenda, not just for this topic, but for all topics that may come before the board. And if you have an interest, then it's great to hear feedback, and a lot of these things could have been resolved in advance. So.
Next, please.
Hi, my name is Jeff Petrick at 628 Thorncroft Drive. Petrick. A question for the board related to the county's recommendation to apply the lower decibel levels, the nighttime decibel levels to weekends and holidays. I noticed the surrounding townships have that in their noise ordinances, but it's not in the recommended East Goshen one. Was there a reason that was not put in?
We did have that in an earlier version and it was taken out, and I don't recall why. Do you guys recall? It was in there at one point.
Something else for us to consider moving forward.
We did have
Do
that
you have any other
conversation.
thoughts, sir?
Yeah, just the one additional comment related to the waivers, and it would seem that if the decibel levels in the guidance seem reasonable, that there should normally not be a need for a waiver unless it's a real exception. And 4 on the surface doesn't sound like a lot, but I know if everyone in Hun Country applied for a waiver at the same time, a pretty loud neighborhood would happen. So I also would recommend going with a lower amount of waivers, if any are needed at all. But thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. You might have to move the microphone down.
Thanks. You saying I'm short?
I'd have to move it down
Kathy-
too.
Kathy Sullivan, 54 Ashton Way. I have a question. Does this include motorcycles? That was my question. Because motorcycles I find to be extremely, not all of them, of course, but obviously you know the ones I'm talking about. So that's my question.
Yeah, I don't believe that they meet any of the enumerated exemptions or exceptions. So yes, I believe it would include motorcycles.
Okay, thank you.
That's something else for us to consider moving forward. Interesting.
In fact, noise sources defined as nuisances explicitly states that excessive noises or sounds by means of vehicles, machinery, equipment, or any other means or method which are physically annoying. So yes, it would include vehicles.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, William Egan, 1422 Mill Creek Drive. Egan is spelled E-G-A-N. It is difficult to learn the full background to the noise ordinance changes that have been discussed by the Board of Supervisors because there are no meeting minutes posted to the website for the meetings between May 24th, 2022 and August 2nd, 2022, the months of June and July. At least not that I could find.
What you can find is that YouTubes are on the website, the East Goshen website of the whole meeting. Where's the camera now? Up there?
Yeah, we have a shared screen, so you can't see
Okay,
them,
I
but
won't show it. But the YouTubes for all of those meetings should be on the website.
I'll check the minutes. We did have a new employee start in that role, so I don't know if that got lost in translation, but I will check that out. But we do have YouTube, channel that has all the meetings on there as well.
Okay.
The minute should be on there.
Yeah,
So
correct.
That's good to check.
You can find, not that this should be, a substitution, but you can find the draft minutes in the agendas themselves as well. Just a heads up as a backup.
And Mr. Egan, you're correct. It looks as if minutes, the last was May 24th and there's a gap till August 2nd.
The Chester County Planning Commission letter dated October 26, 2022 refers to a solicitor draft 9.27.22, but this document is not among the documents provided regarding this hearing.
Yes,
There
that
are
is
two others solicitor drafts, but not that one.
right. So the version that I've included as exhibit B1, that is a clean version of the ordinance, is that same draft. There have been no changes.
Okay.
I just removed any extraneous markings in case they were to adopt it tonight.
Okay. The history has been discussed here tonight. Thank you for that. Have the residents of East Goshen Township made it clear to the Board of Supervisors that they are in favor of the quote tweaking unquote of the quote times of day for certain noise-related activity in residential neighborhoods, end quote? Are the residents of East Goshen Township clamoring for a quote slight change in decibel levels, end quote, in the form of a 5 decibel increase in permitted noise? And I ask, if not the residents, then who? Both the tweaking of the times of day and the slight changes in decibel levels amount to a diminishment in the rights of the residents of East Goshen Township to the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of their property rights. As a resident in the residential receiving land use category, I respectfully request that the Board of Supervisors return the times and sound level limits to those in the Chapter 156 noise ordinance that has protected the interests of the residents of East Goshen Township for 36 years since their adoption on March 18th, 1986. And not among my notes, but I'm increasingly concerned after hearing some of the comments tonight about how much simpler it'll be to change this or these decibel levels going forward with no public hearing. It'll simply be done in a Board of Supervisors meeting.
The Board of Supervisors meetings are public.
Understood,
You're welcome to come anytime.
understood, but they're not a public hearing in the same context that we have this public hearing tonight. And it seems to me a much higher hurdle. And when do we go from 55 to 60 to 65 to 70 at a simple meeting?
So the only difference between a public hearing to adopt a zoning ordinance amendment and a regular adoption of an ordinance at a public meeting is the court reporter. That's the only difference, because when they're adopting a regular ordinance, like this would be going forward, they're still required to ask for public comment before they vote. So you would still have the opportunity to say anything you'd want to say.
Understood. Would there still be the opportunity for injunctive relief that you would get following a hearing such as this?
There are always ways to appeal the enactment of an ordinance. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Regan.
Thanks, Mr. Egan. Are there any other comments or questions regarding this ordinance change? Please come on up and come on over to the microphone. Thank you so much.
You've seen this guy before.
Robert Plummer, 1339 Park Avenue, Westchester. It's more of a disturbance than a noise issue. Well, it does turn into a noise issue, but Amazon delivers a package at 1:30 a.m. to my neighbor, and it starts a chain reaction of dog barking.
Ugh.
And personally, I wouldn't want somebody coming to my house at 1:30 in the morning, delivering a package. I mean, it might not be good for their health. But, you know, it's just saying.
Is it good for their health?
Or,
I will say, I'm not sure that we can limit Amazon package deliveries.
They have a lot of money, they have a lot of money, right?
But we do include standards for vehicles, and we do include standards related to domesticated animals that make noises continuously for a period of 15 minutes or more in such a manner as to disturb persons beyond their property line. So it does address animals a bit.
But a regular contractor can't work past a certain time, but Amazon can, or they could work 24 hours.
I'm not sure that it's the Amazon driver that's making the noise. It's the dog that's on the property, right?
Well, I think they created it.
That's fair.
I think unfortunately, that's a private venture and we don't have any control over them specifically. And we don't know if those people are waiting for medication that could be coming to them in the middle of the night, in all fairness. So I don't know that there's a way we can regulate that.
Sounds like a tail that barks the dog.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, Mr. Pons, good comments that you've raised, and what I've been challenged with this ordinance and prior ordinances and other places that I've been in municipal governments, the noise and nuisance ordinances are very difficult to administer via enforcement. And yours, that's a good example. And I'll give you an example just in our own neighborhood. There's a nearby property where at any given time of the night, it seems there will be, somebody mentioned motorcycles, very loud revving of engines and things, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, celebratory, what have you, I don't know. Were I to call the police on that on a weeknight or a weekend, and they were to respond, It's not 15 minutes necessarily. It might go on for a few minutes and then it ceases. It's disturbing. Does it affect my health or welfare? Not necessarily, but it's disturbing and it seems inappropriate given the time that those occur. But the problem that I have is getting my hands around how we enforce those short-lived situations. Potential for an event where there's music going on for a couple of hours, the police can respond, say you've got to tone it down, or you're going to have to stop it altogether. They can respond. If there is a issue regarding decibels, the measurement of them, and we did go through this with the pipeline, and we had an opportunity with the pipeline because it was ongoing construction, longer than we all wanted it to be, but we had the opportunity to have our engineers who were trained and certified to operate the equipment to measure the sound levels over a period of days. So that in fact, we did take them to court at one point in time, the Sunoco Energy Transfer Partners, got to district court, District Justice at the time, Tartaglia, and had a hearing. I attended, and they ultimately opted not to challenge the ordinance and the data evidence that we collected, and they paid the fine. I forget what it was. It was $10,000 or $12,000, as I recall at the time. But didn't matter to them, but they didn't want, I don't think they wanted any further exposure. That said, that was an opportunity to effectively measure a disturbance. But when we have a situation that is very, again, temporal, to get staff out there or to have our consultant that's certified with operating the equipment, and then proceeding with that to the courts, it is a very extensive process. It hasn't happened here very often. And matter of fact, the years I've been on the board, 6 or to be 7 next year, I think the only time I can recall was the Sunoco noise violations, where in that particular case we prevailed only because they let it go. They didn't challenge. So I'm decibel levels. I appreciate the level increasing. I've certainly read about it as a disturbance, but if someone's using a leaf blower or something, well, I think that's after hours under the exemption. How do we measure that? How do you administer enforcement of that to the point of satisfaction through the courts, or is it just through the township with a letter to the property owner saying, we received this complaint, would you please be cognizant of it in the future? It's softer in that approach, but the enforcement of these type of ordinances seems to me very difficult. And I'm not just talking about this current ordinance under consideration. It's the prior experience I've had over decades with this, and hearing from even our police officers. We've heard it from our chief. We could have, at the time, we could have asked the chief, she could have stayed. The police officers do not really, it's not a high priority for them to respond to those type of nuisance calls for noise. That's just the reality of it. And so we get in this environment and trying to be responsive, but by the same token, these ordinances where they're put down, they're really difficult to enforce. Bill, I'd like you to comment on that.
Yeah, Mike, that's a great point. Any municipal solicitor will tell you that a noise ordinance is the worst ordinance to touch ever because it is so hard to enforce. Because ultimately, when you cite someone under a noise ordinance, that goes to a district judge, and you have to prove to a judge, basically in a criminal case, that the person violated the law. And you know, these are if you're going under the decibel levels or whatnot, it's incredibly hard to make sure you have equipment that's calibrated properly, that you're there when the noise is taking place at 1:30 in the morning with a neighbor's dog barking. It's very hard to enforce.
Also where you're standing at the time of taking the reading.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely. But I will say this ordinance does include a catch-all provision to make it a little bit easier. Which, Derek, could you scroll up to the top of that page? Right there, up, down a little bit. Keep going. That one right there. So section 2, this is what I would call a catch-all provision that basically says, in addition to everything else that we just said, the decibel levels, the times, the whatnot, basically says it is declared to be a nuisance, any noise by any other means or methods which are physically annoying to the comfort of any reasonable person, or which are so harsh, prolonged, unnatural, or unusual in their use, time, and place as to occasion physical discomfort, or which are otherwise injurious to the lives, health, peace, and comfort of the inhabitants of the township, are declared to be nuisances.
Right.
And that is very subjective. You have both in this ordinance. You have the decibel level requirements, and you also have this incredibly subjective catch-all, which basically, if you're going to enforce under that, you just need to prove to a judge that the noise source was so injurious to someone else that it had to be a nuisance.
All right, Bill, let me pick it up from there, and carry this further, because it's a good discussion to have. Under the County Planning Commission review, their comment number 7, in fact, it says the township should review the language provided in the section 156.3D2 pertaining to noise sources as currently written, quote, ... by any other means or methods which are physically annoying to the comfort of the reasonable person, ... quote, as you just cited. This does not appear to be objective criteria that can be enforced by the township. So once again, the problematic relationship of these regulations to the reality of enforcement collide in a very ineffective way. And so were this ordinance to be adopted tonight so that we can move it out of the zoning ordinance, take these comments from the residents in hand, and move forward with further examination of how we can improve upon this new set of regulations. There's one right there where it's a catch-all, but I can imagine, and I've been in court enough times, coming to the judge and saying, well, look, Your Honor, it says here, by any means which are physically annoying to the comfort of any reasonable person. I'm a reasonable person, and man, was I annoyed by that noise.
Lawyers
and
love
that
the word
property
reasonable.
owner. And well, and then the judge is going to say, tell me how. What documentation do you have? Did you have to go to the emergency room? Did you have did you have some calamity? Was there injury to you or your property that you can document? Otherwise, the judge is going to say, there's no basis for this. And if you continue to pursue it, I'm going to cite you for frivolity in my court, and I don't want any part of it. Isn't that a reasonable?
Not necessarily. Well, in one sense it is, but reasonable person standards are everywhere in the law.
Yes.
And so it's up to a judge to determine what is reasonable. So if you go in with this case that's happening every night, sorry, you're still standing here.
No,
Well, we're going to keep using you as an example.
You may be a prop at the moment, but it's important.
If you go to the judge and say, this happens every Tuesday night when my neighbor gets an Amazon package, but it doesn't fit neatly in any of the criteria,
Yeah.
he could say that's no longer reasonable, and he could cite them under this catch-all. So that was intentionally left somewhat subjective to leave it up to the court.
Mr. Plummer, do you have any other comments that you wanted to make, or were you?
No, I just felt more uncomfortable at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, somebody delivering a package, and I don't know what they're there for.
Of
Yeah, I
course.
get
I mean,
it.
I get it. Contrary to
Did I
what you,
put no trespassing sign up and?
contrary to
Something
what you
like
may
that.
have heard here, you can call the police at any time. Michelle is the police commissioner this year. I was police commissioner for the past 2 years. They will come out. If there's a
Absolutely.
problem, they will come out.
It just
And
kind of
if they
seems,
don't come out, you need to let one of us know.
Absolutely.
just seems kind of unfair that a contractor or has to abide by certain hours and,
And then,
uh,
and
which
then
is private
Amazon
guy,
doesn't.
but Amazon could do what they want or.
We have more control over a contractor than a dog.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer. Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Plum.
I'm going to remind people that this is a hearing and we do have 65 attendees on Zoom. So if any of them have any questions, now's the time to raise your hand because we're getting to the end of questions here in the room. So come on up, please.
Hi, everybody. Kathy Bonanno, B as in boy, UONANNO 1606 Heron Lane, Westchester. So hi, everybody.
Hello, Ms. Buona.
Thank you. So I understand about separating the zoning and the noise ordinance. Makes
Speak
total.
into the microphone.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
So I
Kathy.
understand about separating the zoning and the noise ordinance. That makes total sense. So my next question is, what you referenced you could make an amendment in 7 days. Can you give this group tonight, or do we take a hand up to say we want to go 1 to 2? Like, what are the next steps for you to take now? Because I think everybody here is kind of making it clear we want some changes. So how long can you let us know how long that would be?
So I would suggest to the board, maybe each of you think about what you've heard and come up with any proposed changes that you may have and send them to me, and I can sort of compile them and see where we get a consensus. I also invite, at every meeting, there is a chance for public comment. And if there is something you would like the board to do, you're always welcome to come to any meeting, whether it's on the agenda or not, and address the board and ask for changes.
Of course, and I appreciate that. I'm just speaking specifically about this instance. What's the timeline for us to expect a resolution?
Let me see if I can, if we can kind of figure out the possibility of a time frame here. Let's say we do adopt this tonight. Get out of the zoning ordinance. We have a transcript. We start to review that, have staff review it, give us the summary of those comments. You get a chance to look at them as our township solicitor, Bill. And then we then keep this on our agenda for ongoing discussion of what those comments are and developing those into possible amendments to this new chapter based upon that input. And in that context, this adopted tonight, there is a time period for someone can appeal this. This can be appealed, this ordinance or not, by.
Any ordinance can be appealed,
There's
but
about a 30-day period for that
Correct.
in the technical legal world of appealing any of these type of authorized adoptions of ordinances, et cetera. So we had a 30-day period. In that period, we start to assimilate these comments from the residents tonight, begin to codify those into possible amendments that would go to our planning commission. It would also be involved with, we wouldn't need to go to the county planning commission anymore.
or your own planning commission.
Or our own plans. We could just, since they are advisory, but that aside. So, ongoing, we could be looking at continued adjustments and revisions and amendments to this new chapter over the
Perhaps,
course of the next 60, 90, 120 days into the new year.
and perhaps we can just set it for our agenda in February. Because there's a lot of
Yeah, but-
business. There, please. The thing is, there's a lot of business to attend to in the month of December and January.
Yeah.
And so if we can put it onto the agenda, perhaps for that first,
Yeah.
scheduled
Yeah.
meeting in February, and then that will allow enough time as well for the
Yeah.
public to chime in to us individually or as a collectively as a board.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a good
So,
resolution.
and, so thank you,
Thanks, Mrs.
Kathy.
Bolano.
Are there any questions on Zoom regarding the ordinance?
Yes, I think 2 people have their hands raised.
Yep, we're just checking to see who has their hands raised. I'm sorry.
Yep, there's 2
Alright,
people.
So Susan, do I hear you?
Yes, you hear me. My name is
Hi.
Susan Henson. If you can hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Okay, my address is 1631 Bow Tree Drive in Westchester. And what I wasn't too sure what you proposed, Chairwoman, but are you saying maybe not approve it tonight and incorporate what the people's comments, the public's, the citizens' comments are, and then publish in February?
What I had proposed was perhaps we'll be voting on this tonight. I don't know if it's going to pass or if it's going to fail. If it fails, then we have a much longer timeline. If it passes, then we can have a shorter timeline and revisit this in February.
Okay, my concern with that is that I think you guys have a lot on your plate to keep the township going well. And my fear is if it's approved tonight, it's going to move from month to month. And all of these great comments and thoughts that the citizens have had may not be addressed. So I think we have the drive and the momentum to update it now and publish. That's probably not the right word, but make it official after they're incorporated. So that would be my suggestion, if that makes sense.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, well, to update, I mean, you referenced to update it to now with the comments. We have to assimilate all these and get them in a form that we can look at them. There were a lot of good comments this evening, and they're all worth consideration and review and possibly incorporation. And that's going to take some time to do. But if we keep it on our agenda using this new ordinance medium rather than through the zoning ordinance, I think we'll be able to do that effectively and try and address them over the number of months ahead. It is just a continuing agenda item. We always have full agendas, but this is an important one. And I think that I will say I for one I'm willing to make a motion to see if it will be seconded to adopt it tonight and then follow this process starting with the transcript and having that broken down.
Make the motion.
Well, we have
Terry.
another question here. So
People can ask questions after
We have a Terry.
let's go ahead and get, Terry, do you want to go ahead and make your comment or ask a
Yes.
question?
Yes, I have a question. I live next to a business that we've been having
Can you-
issues with.
Ma'am, could you please give us your name and I'm sorry, your
Oh,
name and the
sorry.
street?
I'm sorry, I forgot. Terry Relic, and I live at 12 Tremont Drive.
Thank you, Terry.
Go
ahead.
As we live next to our neighborhood is next to a business that we've had issues with noise for years. And I'm just wondering if there's something in this noise ordinance that we can nail down to help us. It's, because they're out there, it's a drug and rehab center, and they're out there screaming and yelling and cursing. And we've called the police for years, and they say there's nothing they can do for us.
Terry, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think that we do have to talk to our solicitor about that specific situation and maybe get back to you separately. Is that okay with you?
I guess I'm just, if there's
Well, I think it should be discussed in the context of these
Terry
overall
lives
comments.
near the Malvern Institute. And so there's, I think that I need to pass conflict of
Yes.
conflict.
Yeah,
of-
no,
okay.
I'm not looking to, listen, I didn't bring the name up, you guys did, but.
I
if
know.
there- Yeah, because one of the exceptions is the unamplified human voice.
Right.
So that wouldn't, I don't think the unamplified human voice should be an exception. Because
Oh, I see
that,
what you're saying.
yeah, because, if you're living next to a baseball field or a business or anything like we are,
Okay.
it's, so I think the unamplified human voice should not be an exception.
That's an interesting perspective.
Interesting point.
And I think that it would be helpful if you would send that to us in an email, please, so that we know where you stand on that. Do you mind doing
Okay.
that, Terry?
No, not at all.
I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, thank you.
By the way, Michelle just made a good point. That's another way to get comments. That you could use the township email, send it to the township manager, to Derek Davis with any comments, written comments as well on this, or any matters for that matter.
Derek, are there any other questions in the Zoom room?
No.
Okay,
Thank you, Terry.
so I think we've gotten to that point this evening that perhaps the motion could be entertained.
I think we can close the hearing and then there can be the.
Mike?
Yeah,
Okay.
hearing closed.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Kara.
Yes, first of all, all of the board members appreciate some very insightful comments tonight, and it just goes to show how complex and complicated this effort can be to improve these to a standard that is administrable, enforceable, and effective. That's tough to get everybody in the room and all agree that something's effective these years, but I think it's been very, very beneficial. So that's a positive thing. In that regard, as I indicated, I would make a motion this evening to adopt, do we have an ordinance number?
129G.
129G 2022.
129G
Dash
20
2022.
2022. This is an ordinance of the Township of East Goshen. The motion is to adopt this ordinance of the Township of East Goshen, Chester County, PA, repealing chapter 156 of the East Goshen Township Code of Ordinances titled Noise and replacing it with a new chapter 156 titled Noise and Nuisances in order to effectively regulate noise and nuisance disturbances in the township, to remove noise regulations from the East Goshen Township zoning ordinance, and to clarify noise and nuisance standards for specific principal uses effective 5 days from enactment.
I second the motion.
Okay. Having had public comment time during the hearing, do we have to have any other further public comment at this time?
You can ask for it, but it won't be on the record.
Okay.
You generally do after your motion, so I think you should keep with that practice.
If there's any other last comment at this point before we take our vote, I think we've heard all of what you have to say. And seeing no questions, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of passing this ordinance?
Aye.
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 And I'm a nay. I think it needs to be more restrictive. So I am definitely going to be interested in your comments.
Okay.
The motion passes.
Having said that, I appreciate very much, and I think we all do,
Yeah.
the turnout here. And we will have this, whether it's February or earlier, we'll have this noise ordinance to be reviewed. And I hope you all come out.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
this will be a continued work in progress. I think it's a very good comment.
Okay. All right. So moving along, we do have other business to attend to. I know a lot of you are here for probably our budget. We do have a couple of items. Can we just tick them off the list? Bounce back to,
Sure, thanks.
thanks, Kara. We'll let Kara escape, but we need to finish the emergency reports. Derek, you want to just quickly go through those?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So for Malvern Fire Company, for the month of October, East Goshen Township had 43 monthly responses. The year to date was 333. That is 19.1% of Malvern Fire Company's total calls.
Okay.
Good Fellowship Ambulance. I apologize.
That's right.
So let's hit this here. So for the call volume for the month, East Goshen Township had 60 calls. That is 11.4% of Good Fellowship's total call volume, with a total call for the year to date at 462.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And we'll go ahead and move on to the financial report then. Dave, do you want to take that? Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of October 31st, net of pass-throughs, the general fund had year-to-date revenues of $9,507,740, expenses of $8,719,265 for a surplus of $788,400. $475. As of October 31st, general fund balance was $6,569,871. Actual year-to-date revenue finished 5% higher than budget and 3% higher than prior year. Building permits, parks and rec programs, EIT revenue, increased interest earnings, and a 10-year renewal payment of $75,000 for the Liberty Towers land lease agreement is driving the increase versus the budget. Total year-to-date expenses are 4% over budget and 2% higher than prior year-to-date. Stormwater costs, parks program classes expenses, legal fees, and EIT commissions is driving the year-to-date expenses versus the budget. Net result from actual operations year-to-date October is $115,000 higher than budget. In conclusion, through 10 months of 2022, East Goshen Township remains on pace to meet our 2022 general fund budget expectations, and we will continue to monitor year-to-date expenses and revenue versus the budget.
Question, Dave.
Sir.
Your projections for 2022 are $500,000, approximately $500,000 more than the budget was set at. And you're telling us now, as of October, we're what, $100,000 off. Where's the other $400,000 going to come from?
Are you referring to expenses?
Yeah. Well, you have, yeah.
That would offset it because essentially what we have in the year-end projection is a slight surplus of $580 is the current projection. So
Yeah, it's
you get.
November and December would evaporate any year-to-date surplus.
So it's a
Because-
timing issue?
It's always a November, December timing issue.
Okay.
Revenues typically, fourth quarter, go down.
Yeah,
in
it's
all
between,
categories.
it's between $500,000 to $1 million typically from year to
All right.
year.
Yeah.
Dave, do we happen to have a projection yet from WeGo as far as if we're gonna have a surplus there? Do you know anything yet? I know the gas budget's at this point through the roof.
Their latest cut of their 23 budget showed a small surplus.
For the end of this year.
For the end of this year.
Yes.
We have a question in Zoom.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
hello?
Jane, yes.
Yep,
Jane, can you unmute, please?
I think I just
there you
did.
go, you're unmuted.
I just, Jane Joyce, Red Maple Drive. Is this time for comment on the budget and the budget rise?
Not yet, we're
Not
getting
yet.
ready.
Okay,
we're
that's
getting
when I want
close
to talk.
that.
That's when I
Okay.
want to talk. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Okay, treasurer's report.
So treasurer's report is from the weeks of October 27th, 2022 through November 10th, 2022. The general fund revenue over this period was driven by the transfer tax receipts, interest earned, insurance reimbursement of $14,000. This was not the damaged brush hog. This is actually a crusher, which was used during paving. Q3 Comcast revenue of $45,000 and EIT receipts recorded in the past 2 weeks. General fund expenses were WeGo November contribution and payroll expenses. And the refuse fund revenue includes the 2021 recycle rebate received for $25,000. Questions on the bills?
Nope.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the receipts and approve the expenditures as presented in the expenditure register
Thank
and
you.
as summarized in the treasurer's report.
Second motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the board regarding getting the bills? Pretty straightforward this month.
Further note, Portnoy for Cody, year to date, we've collected 30% between East Goshen and Portnoy collections on delinquent counts, about $54,000.
Dave's talking about delinquent taxes that are being collected for us.
Sewer and
Sure, Doug.
yeah.
So, I'm sorry, it's a user fee. I don't want Russ to jump me on that.
Are there any questions regarding the bills here in the room? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm going to skip to the new business and jump to the consideration of the Christmas tree sales. We can get that out of the way in case Wiggins are here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a request every year by Bob Wiggins to sell Christmas trees on his lot at 1301 Westchester Pike. It is permitted in the C1 district with board approval, and it has been approved in the past, and they are seeking that again this year.
Madam Chair, in the spirit of this season and for good enterprise, I would make a motion to authorize Wiggins, Robert Wiggins, to continue this year the sale of Christmas trees at 1301 Westchester Pike,
Thanks, Mike.
with the beginning Thanksgiving and ending on December 24th of this year.
I second that.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding that sale? Here in the room, on the board, or in the Zoom room? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of allowing the Wiggins to sell Christmas trees?
Aye.
All right, so we're gonna bump back to old business, and that old business is consideration and authorization of the advertisement of the preliminary budget for
That's you.
Excuse me, the township meeting room has gone on mute on the Zoom call.
Zoom room.
I apologize.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
Can you all-
Thank you.
Can you hear
Yep.
me now? Can you hear me now?
Have we been hacked?
Can the Zoom room hear us now?
Anybody in the Zoom, can you hear
Yes.
us?
They should be.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
All right. Just so you know, there are a couple of seats that are intermixed here. You can grab a chair if you would like to. I know a lot of you are here for the budget discussion. A lot of you heard that we're going to be increasing, potentially increasing your taxes by 40%. And we have to be mindful of the fact that we're talking about the 1.2 mil in tax that we have currently in place, increasing it by 0.5. And that would equate to a much lower amount than I think many people are fearful of. And we're not looking to make people scared. It's still 40% is 40%. But we are not your school taxes. So we are not going to be increasing your taxes by multiple thousands of dollars. Depending on where you live, that amount will differ, just so you're aware. And I'm going to start things off by just simply saying that there is a path to a projected shortfall of less than 300,000 in my estimation. Based on past performances and projections, it's likely to be even lower than that. And again, it's just a projected shortfall. We have enough in reserves to cover without having to affect our AAA bond rating, which allows us the good fortune of lower interest rate if we're borrowing money and a higher earned interest rate if we are investing. I don't believe that 2023 is the year. And another way to control expenses is to tax only what's absolutely needed. Preemptive taxing leads to a less of a willingness to rein in expenses. And I am very concerned about that. So I'm sorry to have started it off that way, Dave, but there we go. That's my opinion.
Okay, so
Thank
along
you,
those
sir.
lines, just because I know there's been some back and forth and a lot of questions asked about what we're actually talking about when we talk about a real estate millage increase. So at the top here, you can see the EGT RE tax, that's the real estate tax, that's 1.25 mils. We've got the average for the township is about a $250,000 assessed value from Chester County, which is about a $312.50 per year real estate tax for the township. As a comparison to that, the county is almost $1,137.75. And the school tax, the average is $5,622.18. So the difference between it is we are about 27% of what the county charges, and we are about 5% of what the school district charges, just to give everybody an idea. And this slide has a sample neighborhoods on it. So we've got Williams Way, Summit House, and Cider Knoll, Clock Tower, Bow Tree, and kind of the low and high end of the Hershey's Mill villages. So people can get an idea of what they're currently paying. And then over in the right, That yellow column is what the increased amount would be. So you've got an average of about $125 per year. Summit House, Cider Knoll, $37 a year. Williams Way, about $100. Bow Tree, about $137.50. Hershey's Mill Village, anywhere between $50 and $100. That's total per year, and $187.50 for Clock Tower. And these are just averages based on the county assessors information that we get from them. So I just wanted you all to have an idea of the kind of dollars that we're talking about. You can go back to the
Thanks, Dave.
presentation. Sure.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a statement and ask be entered into the minutes.
Sure.
Local government is not a smaller scale version of Washington or Harrisburg. The responsibility I share with my fellow supervisors is a serious one. We must govern. Decisions we make affect the daily lives of not only our neighbors, but ourselves. East Goshen has always been the definition of fiscal responsibility. Not only is our AAA bond rating the golden standard, which saves us thousands of dollars every year, so are the services we provide our residents. As you all know, we are currently facing a $740,000 plus budget for the 2023 budget. Dave and his team have done an excellent job putting together where we can cut and decrease expenses. As supervisors, we have discussed this budget in a public setting numerous times. Every township expense is transparent and can be found online. A no vote to this budget would mean reducing snow materials and resources. If it snows, your roads deserve to be plowed. Reducing stormwater materials. If it rains, we must be able to handle flooding. Reducing traffic signals. If a traffic signal fails, it's our obligation to fix it. Reducing the proposed Malvern Library budget. Neglecting our obligation to fully fund our capital reserve fund. Due to inflation, we expect the Milltown Dam to cost us more than what was projected over 5 years ago. Projections have increased over 72% or more than $2 million since the original proposal. The residents in that part of the township deserve what they have been promised and have waited too long. Most importantly, a no vote to this budget would mean that we are not fully funding and supporting public safety. Public safety makes up over 40% of our budget and equates to over 50% of the expense increase in the 2023 budget. This budget increases funding for our Wego Police Department, including funding for an extra patrol officer and a school resource officer. It increases funding for Goshen Fire Company, which will allow them to get back on track for their much needed capital improvement plan of Station 54 and Park Ave. This increases funding for Malvern Fire Company and doubles funding for Good Fellowship Company. The proposed cuts to the township budget would be an abandonment of our obligation to responsibly manage the township for the benefit of our residents. As you know, we have not had a property millage increase in 20 years. During that time, inflation has increased over 45%, but the services we provide residents have remained excellent. The millage increase will cost the average East Goshen household $125 a year, which equates to about $2.40 a week. No elected official ever wants to increase taxes, but government has no more serious obligation than to protect citizens, their families, and homes. At the end of the day, it is their fundamental responsibility. Some have warned me of the future possible political implications of my yes vote to this budget. My yes vote is to ensure East Goshen residents are safe and we continue to be a premier community in which to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. John, do you want to say anything or no?
Sure. I always want to say something. I don't totally disagree with what Cody just said. However, in a year when inflation is off the charts, when we're looking at a potential recession in the next quarter, I don't see any reason to raise taxes at this time. It might come to be that we need to raise them next year. But right now, I think there are people in the township who are not well-to-do and who will be pinched if we increase their taxes, even this small amount. On top of that, it irritates me. At the last meeting, we identified at least $300,000 worth of cuts that we could make without cutting services. As usual, the projections for revenue in the following year were very conservative, which is a good accounting practice, but is not usually accurate. In the past year, from last year and its budget to this year, revenues went up more than was projected, well more than was projected. On top of all of that, we still have, and I know I get pilloried for this, but we have between 13 and $15 million in reserves right now on our books. Yes, those reserves are sequestered to certain functions, but that's still a lot of money. We are not in a position where if we don't raise taxes, we will somehow go bankrupt. We won't. So I understand my colleague's statement, but I am opposed to a tax increase at this time.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to make any comments at this time, or
Yes,
maybe?
and these may be extensive, but I want to share them as I might, and if I don't read them, they are also available on the 10/18 Board of Supervisors minutes. And I'll try and get through this as expeditiously as possible, but there's information here that I think is important to hear and see if you understand it and appreciate it. And upon review and detailed discussions with the East Goshen Township Director of Finance and the Township Manager for the 2023 preliminary budget, the general fund long-term projection, our 10-year projection, capital reserve fund funding, historical trends looking back, data going back nearly 20 years, and recommendations from the township professional staff, a tax revenue enhancement in the form of a property real estate tax millage increases, my opinion, warranted commencing with the 2023 budget. As Cody mentioned, since 2004, which was the last tax increase, property tax millage increase here in the township. Prior to that, there was no property tax increase. The figure that I have is inflation has been 47+%. This does not include the projected 2022 inflation index of 8.2%. From 2012 through 2021, township general fund revenues have increased an aggregate of 7%, while expenditures have increased 31+% during the same aggregate period. Cumulative inflation during that period was 25%. East Goshen Township now, for practical purposes of financial planning, is a fully built out, developed suburban municipality with an aging population and aging infrastructure. The general fund long range plan, this is our 10-year projection for our general fund, forecasts an annual operating deficit through the year 2033. Now, in consideration of the updated 10-year projection, which includes one version includes the 0.5 property tax millage increase, which equates to anywhere between $700,000 and $800,000. There would be a balanced budget in 2023. There would be a modest surplus in 2024. And then in 2025, I believe, the deficits again return, and the trend on these projections shows a continuing deficit trend all the way up to $2 million by 2033. Now, projections are based on assumptions. We've looked at the assumptions, whether it's revenue, earned income tax, real estate transfer tax, based upon prior information and understanding, looking ahead. They seem reasonable and rational to me. They're not perfect. Projections, as we know, are not perfect, but they certainly show a trend that, from my review, and I've been in this business as a municipal manager and a director of finance for prior decades, it needs address. I will say that there is no great time to ever increase taxes. It's a dreaded word in our culture, in our society, in our country. It has been put off for some time. There has been indications that it was going to be necessary. There is often a debate about incremental tax increases, keeping up with inflation, cost of living, COLA. or the so-called one-time, long time, which show these larger percentages. Many municipalities opt for the one-time, long time. But if you look at entities like the school district or the county, they have used incrementalism to increase the taxes over time. So the projections and is some of the current information that Dave has prepared show that the existing fund balances that we have over the next couple of years are going to be drawn down in the vicinity of $7 million or $7 million. As John Herzog alluded, we do have funds. There are enterprise funds such as the refuse and recycling and the sewer fund, which as enterprise funds, they are sequestered to the user fees to generate the revenue to operate the service, whether it's sewer or whether it is refuse and recycling in our case. There are other funds that are designated for from the state, liquid fuels. They are very specifically authorized so that there is not an open book for use of all the funds at any given time. Under the second class township code, unlike other entities of government, we are required to balance our budget every year. There is one method of doing that is to use what's referred to as unappropriated fund balance, fund equity, or our savings. That is our fund balance to balance the budget. But like our own households, when you start to use savings to pay for your operating expenses, that's usually a sign that something is amiss in the household, and it starts to throw some red flags up. We also have fund balance policies that indicate that when the fund balance gets to a certain point, that the board has to respond with addressing that, typically in the form of a revenue enhancement, a tax increase. We looked at expenditure reductions, cuts, and I've discussed that at length with our fellow board members, with the staff. And there have been comments about, well, there's got to be things you can cut and remove. So as an example, we could start with our what's essential, what's not essential, what's wanted, what's needed. Essential services in my book have to do with emergency services. We are required as a second class township code to provide emergency services, fire, ambulance, emergency response. Police, I think we would agree, costly as it is, that we can't really go back to state police. And with our partnership in WeGo, it's a complex relationship. Fortunately, we just finished our negotiations with the police labor union, and we reached an agreement without arbitration. Last time we had to go to arbitration, that was $60,000 in the hands of the attorneys to handle that. So it was a very pleasing outcome for a 3-year agreement. As an example, what's that agreement? 5.75% next year, 3.75 for the other 2 years. WeGo is still lower than some of the adjoining police operations departments. We looked at other expense possibilities. Reducing our capital funding for our capital reserve fund, our capital reserve schedule. And that's a schedule of existing assets, our public works fleet, parks, facilities, and related items that we have on that schedule. To not fund your existing assets so that there's funds available for replacement when the schedule shows, that does not make sense for good financial planning and management. The infrastructure is aging. While our sewer system is distinct as an enterprise fund from the general fund, we have a major project now that were we not to have had the ARPA funds, we would not have been able to complete that essentially it's emergency repair that's going to take 2 years. That's just the way the permitting works. But that's over at Hershey's Mill Estates. That's going to be $1.5 million project, and ARPA is going to take care of, I think, just about all of that, the relief funds. No, 950 of the 1.5 million. That capital reserve fund is under a lot of stress. The capital reserve fund that we have, apart from the sewer, is funded by the general fund. It doesn't, it is the stepchild, the necessary stepchild of the general fund. That's the only source of revenue that it has, unless we have grants, and grants are unpredictable. We have a couple of projects that were mentioned here, the Milltown Dam project. That originally started with a mandate from the Army Corps of Engineers, just the same as the Hershey's Mill Dam project. That was a mandate. Army Corps of Engineer, fix that dam to our standards or take it down and work with it. We've had to respond to that. When you have a long-term project like the Milltown Dam that extends out 4 or 5 years before you can even get started, and we waited 2 years for a permit from the DEP, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, 2 years. Michelle was dogged in her contacting the administrator for the region, DEP, about the issuance of that permit. It still took 6 or 8 months from those conversations. But when you have those kind of projects that extend, particularly now in the environment that we're in, talk about supply chains and everything else, and what has been represented that we're going to do there, we're initially looking at a $2.5 million project. Who knows what it's going to be now when we finally bid later on, probably the first quarter of the new year. A lot of controversy over the Paoli Pike Trail. It was stopped. Please. A lot of controversy over that. One of the sections wasn't completed, but the board opted to have further conversation about an alternate route. That is still at the moment. There's no funding for it, and it's not going to move anytime in the next years ahead, which may please some, but in some it's not going to be satisfactory. So that when you look at some of those needs of infrastructure, you look at the importance of capital funding and spending your savings. It's not the equation for well, some people will call it a premier community, as East Goshen is. There are always going to be folks, residents, who are going to be in some sort of transition and with some financial stress. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. We could have talked about this during the COVID episode for over 2 years. That wouldn't have been the right time to do it. Next year, we're going to have they're going to have 2 positions for supervisor open, 2 new candidates, and that kind of discussion will occur then. Maybe that won't be the time to do it either. It's been 20 years, and this township is important. When you think about what services you can name off the top of your head that you receive from the county directly, apart from the school district and whether you have current children in the schools, have we been to a school board meeting to ask them about, do we really need, and forgive, I know it's very sensitive, but do we need diversity counselors? Do we need diversity coordinators? Do we need assistance to the assistant superintendent? We don't ask those kind of questions at the school board that has a $300 million budget. And how they spend their money. And of course, folks in Hershey's Mill villages, they're paying their $5,000 a year to the school board. We look to the county where most of us are paying $1,000, anywhere between $800 to $1,500 a year to the county. 911 is essential service, terrific. But can you name other services? Have you ever been to the commissioners' meetings to ask them about their budgets? We're accessible here. And that's a great thing about local government. The 3 pillars are accessibility, transparency, and accountability. And that's been important to all of us here on the board. And that's why you're here tonight. Bet you the commissioners don't get outpourings like this. And the school board, maybe they do, but you have 3 minutes to speak, and that's it. This is an open opportunity, local government. And I think that in that context, that's a positive thing. But the services here in East Goshen, I couldn't find expenditures that were significant to come close to the $740,000 deficit projected for this next year to close that gap, short of using our savings. And after 20 years, and the other stats that I shared, we probably should have been doing something incrementally all along, but we didn't. Whether it's appearances, whether it's political atmosphere, whether it's continuing to move the can down the road, so to speak, these things occur. 40% sounds dramatic, but you have to look at the absolute numbers. Is it insignificant? No. But for instance, we have a couple cell phones at our house. Happens to be with Verizon. Yeah, we can go to another carrier, but we went from $90 a month to $105 with a quick notice. So excuse me, it's my opportunity. You may speak when you want.
Please, people.
Oh, wait, no, wait. So that's $180 right there for the year. What could I do? Who am I going to talk to there? When we talk about when we talk about
we'll have an opportunity.
when we refer to our federal government and our state government, how much input do we have on the budget and how much expenditures are going there? You have input here, but that we really don't know what's going on. The national debt's become an abstraction. And you know what? It's just, well, we'll fix it because we can spend more money because we can print more. Well, we can't do that here. And this is a quality municipality with great people and great services. And I can't find any that are either non-essential or just wants and fluff. And the numbers, I trust the staff and what they presented. And that's where I am to support this kind of an increase this year. And I would say this, based upon those projections, and they'll be examined each year, they're going to be more ahead. If we look at some of our neighboring municipalities, Westtown, our partner with WeGo, has a 3.5 mil property tax. Of course, the borough is unique, but they're in the school district. They're at 7 mils. East Bradford Township, where I used to be, they're now at 1.75. I think they're going to go up. West Whiteland Township is less than 1 mil. I don't think we want to look like the plan that West Whiteland is now finally implemented. But great one, because I was just going to mention that. Willistown is less than 1 mil. I think they're about 0.7, if I'm not mistaken. Willistown is the beneficiary of the Great Valley School District, which to date has not collected or imposed the earned income tax. So Willistown is collecting the full 1%. And when the time comes that the Great Valley School District decides to impose the earned income tax, that's going to be split down the middle. So there's going to be probably coming up in there, whether it's before the end of the decade, I don't know. But that's the uniqueness of Willistown. So those are some of my thoughts and perspectives. Taking a few minutes, but I didn't want to read the statement that I had read earlier, but it is in the October 18th minutes. If you want to take a look and some of the other trend information and other information collected through our Director of Finance that I've assimilated, I'd welcome you to do that. Thank you.
Just to be completely clear, we never discussed, any of us discussed touching the capital reserve contributions. So the payment into the capital reserve fund was never going to be touched. So the replacement value would continue to be placed into the fund to replace equipment and necessary items that are needed to run the township. We never talked about getting rid of snow plowing or not doing it. We never talked about going to the state police. In fact, we've added a police officer and a school resource officer. So we've done that. And we didn't discuss those types of things, but we did discuss taking things like not giving the Malvern Library an additional $5,000 that they didn't ask for. We talked about spending less than $15,000 on a volunteer luncheon. We have a lot of volunteers in our township and we're grateful for them. And many of you are volunteers as well. We appreciate you and your expertise, but spending $15,000 on any luncheon is unreasonable to me. We should not be spending, unfortunately, we should not be spending $9,000 on printed newsletters. I would love to get a printed newsletter out so that we at least have a paper copy once a year. And we can do that by getting advertisers to sponsor. We wanted to look at things like roadside litter. Roadside litter costs about $5,000 or so each time. It's picked up, I think it's about 5,000 each time. Is it?
We had 5,000 in the budget.
Yeah, they're doing it a little bit differently. So whenever Mark lets them know so that we know that
What
they're
area?
actually doing it, yeah, it's
Right.
usually $500 a week or something.
So
like
it's a
that.
$5,000 budget.
So it's a $5,000 budget, but that roadside litter, it's trashy and they are picking up litter in places that our volunteers are really not able to get to safely. So these are kinds of things that we were looking at. We weren't looking at reducing your services. We weren't looking at going to state police. So any other statement to say otherwise is not entirely accurate.
Yeah, I want to, Michelle, I just want to clarify. I wasn't suggesting we go to state police. I'm just simply saying that these are essential services that we're currently providing, and there's no going back to state police. Of course, we're not going to do that, but it's an indication when you know, we have comments from residents, and I appreciate it because you're not looking at this stuff routinely, and this gets your attention. But you know, we have these expenses that we look at, and it's pulling back from all, whether it's public works, whether it is parks and recreation, whether it's emergency services, which comprise probably 75% of the budget. There's not much we can move there. So
I wasn't done. So I want to finish what I wanted to say.
I'm sorry.
We didn't have to cut these services. We were able to find 5,000 here, 10,000 there. John and I were able to do the work. We sat down with Dave and Derek. We looked at all of the areas where we could consider slimming down a little bit. It's not ideal, but we did the best we could. We came to within about $300,000. We have millions of dollars in reserves. These are millions of your taxpayer dollars that we've already collected. And I think it's important to remember that if we raise this tax and we have this revenue, it's going to be so easy to just raise the expenses to meet the revenue. And that's where we have a problem. So I don't want us to do that. I want us to be more frugal in this particular environment. I'm not saying we can sustain this. This is not sustainable. This is not something that we can potentially go and do again next year. I don't want to say that we need a tax increase next year, but unfortunately, it's looking like we're going to be going in that direction. And these are things that are beyond our control: expenses, services, supply chain issues. You all know it. You're experiencing it in your own households and your own businesses. But it would be nice for a township. You don't have the luxury of going from Verizon to Comcast when you live in East Goshen Township. You can go from East Goshen Township to another township, but it's with a great deal of effort. You have decided to live here because of the community that we have. It's a great community. I think we need to do the work, to do the heavy lift and say, we're going to trim down a little bit this year, meet the rest of it with reserves if we need to. We have a very conservative EIT projected for next year. We have potential, even next year with WEGO, a potential surplus that we could see. So it's one of those things where we need to look at all of the options that are on the table. And at this point, I guess, Dave, do we need to go any further? Or do we want to open this up to people?
Madam Chair, can I make a comment, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a couple of points of clarification, please. The EIT that was projected in that Michelle just said was was conservative. Isn't that the most
This is
Isn't it the
basically
highest
flat with,
EIT?
it's flat with 2022 projection,
Which is record,
which
which was
is,
a record.
which is flat with 2021.
Okay. And then also the revenues for permits was also a record revenue.
Correct.
Okay. And then also back on October 18th, options to consider in the budget, expense decrease, Goshen Fire Company, paving materials, snow materials budget. Obviously, we decreased the amount for the luncheon. And then also we agreed on eliminating the newsletter, but to say we did not discuss those is not true.
They didn't come out. They're there.
The ABC is in there for 10,000.
The ABC is decreased though. It's not 15.
Right, it's 10,000 and the printed newsletters in for 12,000. We're investigating to see advertising from local businesses to see if we could cut that. Hopefully have it pay for itself.
Madam Chair, I don't know if we want to do this before or after public comment, but given the fact that it's up for preliminary budget passage, I at least like Dave to go over the broad numbers as we got right into discussion, and that's fine. But if we're going to have a motion on the table, I think, Dave, if you want to go over just the broad numbers of 2023 and what we're discussing for that purpose, I think that would be prudent either now or after public discussion. Thank you.
High level as far as what?
As far as just what really quick, what we're proposing as far as revenues, expenses. I know it's.
I need an explanation from Dave.
Okay.
On the revenue column, on the far right side, you have a 7.9%, right?
Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking at page
Revenue.
one, the big
Okay.
numbers.
Okay.
Yep. That is 7.9% over your 2022 projection, right?
Correct.
Okay, I would like to just have people understand that that is also 13% over the 2022 budget. So we've gone from a 2022 budget to a 2023 budget, and it's 13%, not 7.9%. 7.9% is the increase from the projection to the 2023 budget.
Yeah, I
Do
will.
have that right?
Yeah, and you said that the budget was conservative this past year and we didn't know what a EIT was going to do. So after revising the projection to come up to the $5.6 million level that we saw in 2021, rather than the 5.2 that was in the budget, and showing 5.6, everything else being flat, we would still be $700,000 shy.
The other thing I don't understand is, and it's probably just me, I don't understand the 2.4% down below. If the 2022 projection is $11,377,000, and we're going to a proposed budget of $12,278,000, that's not a 2.4%.
No, that's a bad formula. I apologize, John. That is actually 7.9 as well.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it?
Yep.
Because it's the 2 out. Okay, I'm clear on that. That's not 2.4% for everybody. That's 7.9%.
To be clear, John and I were fighting over bug. Sorry.
Michelle got it.
So I guess just to kind of clarify, this is looking back over the last 5 to 10 years, this is the most aggressive revenue forecast outside of the tax increase. As far as real estate tax, earned income tax, real estate transfer tax, building permit fees, all of our other sources of revenue, this is more aggressive than I've seen in the last 10 years here. I think, honestly, I hope that we come in where we have expenses. We do have the latest estimates from WeGo in here. We have the actual insurance numbers that we know for health insurance. That's up 10.5%. We've got those are the two biggest things driving it, is the WeGo, fire, EMS, insurance, and you'll see Parks and Rec. Parks is up, so is 82%. That's because of the amount of transfer in capital reserve, which is assuming a Milltown pocket park of 150,000 and $125,000 for the park pickleball tennis court improvements.
Dave, I would also like to say 150,000 for the pocket park at this point. I know there's been some discussion on the board for moving forward on that. I'd like for us to eliminate funding for that until the Milltown Dam is taken care of, especially with it being $2 million more than we expect.
For those of you who are not aware that of course, there's the Milltown Dam Park project, which is the larger where the reservoir is, but there was also interest to develop a smaller little, what I call a postage stamp at a pocket park in the vicinity of the immediate neighborhoods. And the initial thoughts was maybe we can do something for $10,000 or $15,000. We realized we all didn't get off the boat yesterday, so that was going to be more than that. And I said that to my colleagues who were interested in putting that forth, I would support that. I appreciate your comments, Cody. It is a new capital expenditure, but it is one that I know there's been interest to do, so that if the budget is approved under the current proposal, I would continue to support that pocket park, but I want to support my colleagues on that one.
What's in for it, Dave?
150,000. Jason went out and got input from the local residents there to see what they actually wanted. There was a lot more small kids, which they wanted some playground equipment, which would be installation as well. Clean up the area, have seating, shade, fix the trails, put in fencing so that people have their homes blocked from the trails.
Just so everybody understands what
No
we're talking about, down in Milltown, which is, in my opinion, a neglected part of the township. They have a park and it really isn't a park we can be proud of. It doesn't look anything like the park up here, which many of us enjoy. I certainly do. My suggestion, and Mike has stated it correctly, my suggestion was that we start improving that park for the people down there. It's a far trek for them. They have to get in a car and drive 4 miles or whatever it is if they want to come up to our park here. And there are more and more kids down that way. But I had suggested maybe $10,000, maybe $15,000 of our budget be spent improving that park for the people down in that part of the township. I never said $150,000, and I wouldn't support $150,000. I think we can do a few $1,000s every year for the next 5 or 6 years and have a very nice park down there. But that's the issue here.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'd just like to share with everybody that as far as the expenses go, and Mike's gone through some of the things that we look at, from my perspective, I look back about 3 years by line item. So in the detail that you have, every single one of those line items, I'll go back and I'll look and see what did we do? What were the one-offs? What can I take out? What's realistic? And then what does inflation look like on top of that number? So these are as realistic as I can be. And then I also get input from Parks and Rec for their numbers, Mark Miller for all of our costs that we're seeing this year and how that might roll into next year. So if we're not cutting services, I can pull dollars off of some of these projections, but without actually stopping a service, when we do that service or order those parts or get those materials, they're going to be at what they cost. So we may be on the hook for larger bills than I would budget for. So this is a much more accurate budget, in my opinion. The option is to not do a real estate increase. You could, which I put together for Michelle and John and the rest of the board. And you would probably be looking at, I don't think it would be 300. I think it would be more towards $500,000 because of the police budget and lack of use of the police trusts in the current environment. So you could use $500,000 of the reserve balance. That would be what we would do. We would probably be using $500,000 instead of 300. But just to let you guys in on the process. And I appreciate everybody who's emailed, asking questions. I want everybody to review it, and I appreciate your input. So.
And for the record, this is one of the most transparent townships as far as this process is concerned. Some townships do it in a workshop setting, and the public is not as aware. We've been discussing this very openly since September, since our first meeting in September. And so as we get down to the nitty gritty, this is when people start to really pay more attention, because we're finding that there's so little wiggle room in this budget that, you know, it's important for you all to be part of this process. I think that at this point, maybe we can entertain a motion and then open it up to public discussion. Is anybody willing to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to advertise the 2023 budget in the Daily Local News.
I'd second that.
Okay, and this, to be clear, this motion just means that we're not passing the budget. We're turning the budget over to the public for public review and comment for the next 20 days.
It's actually,
Maybe longer.
at minimum legally, it has to be 20 days. It's going to wind up being significantly longer in this case because we're looking at probably December 20th as a passage.
We're probably closer to 30 days, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so you're all aware, in the event that it passes to you all, the next step is going to be for us to get something over the finish line, which means in order to do that, we've got to either come up with cuts and some wiggle room behind the scenes, or we've got to come up with a tax increase, in which case it would have to go to a resolution to increase the tax
So-
by any part of the mill.
Madam Chair, I'm going to request from the Zoom room to show the amount being proposed for each neighborhood as we showed earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So
that
if
was
I
that
could put
first
that up while
screen.
people are asking questions.
Great.
that
Yeah,
would
go ahead
probably
and
be-
put that screen up
Yep.
then, please. And all right, we have the motion on the table, so we are not going to vote on this until we've heard from some of the people here. So Jim, do you want to come on up and start things off?
Certainly. Jim Douglas, 1405 Grand Oak Lane. The biggest thing that I want to discuss, I understand budget shortfalls and all that, but the whole thing, and I'm pretty sure most of the people in this room are going with, is it's our money that you are dealing with, and you have a surplus of our money. Right now, at this time, when groceries are 30% more, fuel's 75% more for our personal budgets, it's not the time to add another increase when you already have monies to take care of it. I understand we're going to be facing a tax increase. It's going to be necessary. I'm just saying this is not the time to do it now. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little disappointed with some of you that sat there and said, I'm going to not do this. I'm not going to do this. And then all of a sudden you're doing it. I put my name and recognition out there to say, hey, vote for this person. You should do it. They're a good straight shooter. And now I feel like I'm getting kind of shot in the back there. So I'm just saying, this is not the time now to do a tax increase. When inflation is at 7.5%, which is, oh, it came down 1%, yippee. It's not the time to do it. That's all I'm saying. And I'm pretty sure most of the people in here would agree. We understand taxes are necessary. It's just not now. Please change your mind. Say no on this.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. Hello.
Rob John Frito, King George Court. I know we haven't had a price increase or a tax increase in 20 years. How many houses were built in 20 years? I know in 10 in my neighborhood, in the last 10 years, we've had probably 20. So that's free money. It is free money. The trash men are already going down there. They're picking up another trash that we pay for. The snowplows are already going down my driveway. So it's basically free money that the township gets. So we don't need the price increase. You mentioned the budget. A budget is, if I have $100,000 to spend a year, I better make, that's it. We have 100,000. 3 years ago, we built a garage to wash our trucks, to get the salt off. That's probably in your budget. That's where'd that money come from? Why are we doing that? Why are we spending money? That's not a necessity. That wasn't a necessity that we spent money on. How much did that cost? I know it wasn't 300, probably more than that. So we're spending money that we don't have. That's the problem. We need to cut the fat, cut spending money, and save. Learn how to work within our budget. That's what the budget is. I own my own business. I don't spend outside. And if I do, yeah, I have to tap my savings. I don't go to the bank. We are the bank. Township people are the bank. So you're coming to us, we say, no. We don't want it. Don't do it. Use your budget. Stop spending our money. Plain and simple.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. For the record, Rob built some of those houses he's talking about.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Keith Toll in Hibbard Way and 1711 Hibbard Lane. And I guess one of the questions I have, Dave, is the budget as I'm looking at it here is proposed at a 7.9% increase. Is that correct? Am I
Yes.
reading that correctly?
Yes,
Okay, I'm trying to understand the delta between, the millage rate increase of a significantly higher percentage and the 7.9% that I'm looking at. Can you help me understand that?
sure. That the 7.9 would be the revenue in total, whereas the millage is only applying to the real estate tax for East Goshen. So
Okay.
it's a 40% increase to the homeowner.
No, I understand that. What's the number? What's the net number of the increase? What's the revenue generated? result of that.
784,000.
So, okay, and that's in comparison to what is the number that the 7.9 represents? I'm just trying to do a comparison of those two numbers so that I can rationalize, is that a relative offset of those numbers? Or is there, or is it weighted higher as a result of the,
900,000 is the difference between 12,278,000 and 11,378,000.
right, so, all right, so what we're saying is it's a almost $1 million shortfall or over generation of revenue.
It would be an increase of about 900,000 in the total budget numbers, and about 784 of that comes from the millage tax increase.
Okay, so the other thing, Mike, when you went on, you made some comments specifically about the school board and about the different resource positions that they have there, right? Human resource related positions. And I'm not necessarily advocating that, but I haven't heard that discussion within the township. Has that been considered? Positions within the township, because we're talking about increasing revenue, we're talking about decreasing expenses. And, human capital is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
You took the liberty of mentioning that with the school board.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, where has that fallen as a discussion point for the township?
From my standpoint, we have reviewed our staffing levels. Of course, retirement of Rick Smith, and the transition of our director of finance, those were two replacement positions. Same with our codes and zoning officer who transitioned. So they were in place. We have not added a staff. We added one public works staff member. I think it was 2 years ago. And from what I have been told, and what I observe, and I'm here on a regular basis, the existing administrative staff we have is fully engaged. They're not sitting around. They're fully occupied with responsible tasking and duties according to their job description and the oversight of the township manager. The Public Works Department, it's an opportunity for me to say with the number of Public Works staff crew that we have, it's one of the most exceptional public works departments in all of Chester County, and I put them up against anybody with the skill sets and the ability of the work they can do, including their oversight and regular maintenance, not the operation, but the regular maintenance support of the sewer facility. Their skills are non-pareil as far as.
I'm not making a value. I'm not looking for anyone to make a value judgment on one's skills or one's worth, right? That's not, and that's not my intent. My intent is that
I think we're adequately staffed, but not overstaffed, is, I guess, to come back to your response.
Okay.
I agree. And to be perfectly honest, Derek took on not just the manager role, but when our codes director left, He was our codes director because he has the certifications for that. When our administrative assistant left, he took that role on as well. And honestly and truly, the staff here, all of them are multitaskers in that they are cross-trained for other positions. So if someone is out for any period of time at all, whether it's a day or a week or a month, there is cross-training so that we don't have to bring in any temporary staff. They just pick up and they do what they have to do. They're
Sure,
amazing.
and I understand that. I just,
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that when times get tough, everything has to be evaluated. Not
everything
making
has to be
a
evaluated.
value judgment one way or the other, but asking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it would seem to me that the other comment that was made, Mike, was that, and I don't know that you actually gave any opinion one way or the other, but you said that there could be essentially a big bang on the tax rate, could be graduated moving forward, in different scenarios, right, that could play out. What is the intent here? If we're talking about, what the current request is.
Yeah.
Why doesn't someone share, if they would, if you've researched this, right, and had this discussion, let's go beyond the current proposal. What is the 5-year and what is the 10-year projected plan?
That's an excellent
Right?
question. Nice. That's an excellent question. And I think we could probably do that, Dave, through our looking at the 10-year projection and seeing what that translates to into additional revenue needs. We could
Yeah.
definitely do that and provide some sort of.
I think on the 10, sorry to interrupt, I think on the 1018 agenda, I know Dave, he did like 1.25, 1.5, 1.5, 1.75.
There was-
What our revenue would stand at that point. So-
Right, but what I'm asking
What's
is.
it look like? When might there be another increase?
Exactly,
he-
because,
Dave-
because
I think Dave
it's,
provided that for us.
it's one thing, it's
I have a
one
plan
thing
out
if,
there
if.
that shows that.
We
if
have that.
Understand, yeah, right,
We have that. I don't know if it's been shared with the public.
I think it's really important.
through an
because I
agenda.
think it provides context.
Yeah, I
right,
agree.
to
That's a
what-
really
to
good
where
point.
the plan is.
I agree. And I'm not
Post the
really
long-range
tuned into
plan.
it here. I'd like to see it as well, to know what
We have it.
maybe,
We did that in the June.
Yeah,
Tim's
but they're on the
coming
website.
And the last thing
Yeah,
I'll
some-
say is
yeah.
that I think that I understand the comparisons with the, that sort of that, I guess, the comparisons with the other townships, the comparison with what the, where we fall percentage wise. And I think that's all great fodder for discussion. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of like when I ask you a question, not you specifically, Mike, but I ask you a question and you start giving me a lot of, what everyone else is doing,
How you
right?
doing?
I don't really
I get
care
it.
what
I get
everyone
it.
else is doing.
Yeah, if
I care
can,
what we're doing.
I get it.
And I think that, and I'd really like to try to channel the discussion to
Yeah.
what it is we're doing as a township and where we're headed
Excellent
and
point. I-
how we get there.
Yeah, the
This is
comparison can be toxic, and that was a reference point, but you're exactly right. This is what counts, is where we are right here.
yes, sir, I appreciate it. And to clarify, the latest projection I believe that I did, the 0.5 mil carries us through with minimal deficits through 2028, 2029.
Well, that's all well and good, but could you put that spreadsheet up with this when we advertise it? when
Put
we
it wherever
out
you want
the
to.
public?
Yeah.
It's in the agendas.
Is that okay to do?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So just for the,
That's good.
ju-
That was
Hold on,
really
hold
good.
on.
I like that.
just for everybody in the Zoom room, because I'm getting asked this question. We will go to questions to the Zoom room after everybody in the actual room has been answered. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Frank Morgan, 1704 Clock Tower Drive. First, I adopt, and I won't repeat all of the arguments made by the first speaker, Mr. Dugan. I'd adopt those. Secondly, I'd remind the board that we have already absorbed a tax that isn't a tax with the increase in the sewer and rubbish rates. Okay, that hit. In addition to that, just quickly, historically, this tax, the East Goshen Township tax, was passed in 2004 for a specific purpose. It was for the purchase of the Gennardi's property, and it was for purchase of Applebrook. And now it's being used for all other things when, essentially the tax was designed to fade out after Applebrook and Gennardi's was paid for. So I think the money that has been collected ought to be used and no tax increase this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Morgan. I wanted to share, if I might, that's an interesting point you made, Mr. Morgan. I'm looking at the November 20th, 2003 letter from the then Board of Supervisors to the township residents. And it says here, the supervisors were authorized in November 1996 to impose a real estate property tax to pay for debt service associated with the borrowing of $3 million for the acquisition of open space when voters overwhelmingly approved the open space referendum. The proceeds were used to acquire the 100 acres of open space in Applebrook. The supervisors elected not to impose a real estate property tax at that time, as the township had adequate reserves and was running a budget surplus. So that's, I have this letter if anybody wants to see it or get a copy of it from November 2003 when this first tax increase back when occurred.
Can I comment really quickly on that, gentleman's? You mentioned this the refuse rate. Our contract did go up. We have a 5-year contract typically with them, and it went up 32.5%. So that is what drove the increase from $75 to $100. And that should hopefully carry us through the next 5 years at least.
Right. That was a public bidding contract.
Yeah, and one other thing that I just wanted to point out is in 2017, the township took out over $8 million in bond money to fund the Milltown Dam Park, West Goshen Treatment Center, West Town Way improvements, Philly Pike Trail, number of other big projects. There was never a tax increase put on for that either. And I don't know if that was completely conveyed at the time, but we've got a loan that's going to roll off, which is about $500,000 in principal and debt payments. It'll be gone in 2024, and that's exactly when the new $500,000 kicks in for this bond money that was borrowed. So.
It's referred to when you're borrowing over periods of time as wrapping.
Yeah,
so
you
have an even.
So you don't increase your amount of debt, but it's never really rolling off because you're just putting more debt on the end. So now we've got that going out to 2037, just so you guys are all aware.
Okay.
Fred Pioggia, 1636 Yardley. First, what I want to do, these people are quality people. I don't know if you realize it or not. A lot of townships, in my previous life, we didn't have this, but these people they're listening to you, and I'm sure they're going to respond to you. What I wanted to go over is the budget. I'm looking specifically at page 50 of 98. That's your, all your, the balances of all the categories. I'm looking at, you guys are really, really doing good with your reserves. The numbers I'm looking at, they're really small, but just on the operating thing is like over close to $3 million worth of reserve. That's only one category. If you draw it all the way down there, it's close to $19 million in reserves. And it goes, it's spectacular. So I don't know why we're talking about a rate increase, be honest with you. But no, this is real. They have really, really done a good job in finances there. Now your budget, I do see the budget went up $900,000. The one thing that really slaps me in the face is the category with the parks. Your originally was like 324. No, take that back. $300,000. And in 1 year, it went 82%.
You just address it. Dave, would you
Yeah,
address
I'm just saying, but you're going from 300,000 to 700,000. So there's a lot of cutting in there. I don't know what you're doing it for, but it's a substantial amount
Yeah,
of
so
money increase.
yes, sir. In the 5-year capital plan, included in that is $150,000 for the Milltown Pocket Park, which we were talking about, the $125,000 for the East Goshen Township pickleball courts and tennis court improvements. $20,000 to $25,000 in for the entire back fencing of the park that needs to be replaced. And then there's one other thing. Improvements around the outside of the playground area, something like that.
Yeah. But I just want to say, I seriously, these people are quality people. They really are. You know, there's friction. They really are. They do it.
Here's the 5, Fred.
No, they really work for sure. One thing that's, I forget what line of it is. Could you please change the holiday tree to a Christmas tree? You have a line there.
Thanks, Fred.
Kevin Perot, Perrot, 1416 Grand Oak Lane.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Good evening. I have a question first, and that when was the East Goshen tax that's around $100 and some dollars? When was that passed?
2003 to be enacted in 2004. So that's when we voted on that,
All right, so that's
back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
We've been
we
saying
voted on that.
approximately 20 years ago. It's not quite 20
18.
years.
all right, so because they referred to there was no tax since for 20 years. I thought it was sooner or not as far back as that. So
No.
my comment would not apply.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. You still got the best car in town.
Hi, Jim Fonce, King George Court. I was going to also comment on the parks issue. That line item definitely jumped out at me. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, please.
Sorry.
Thank
I
you.
was just wanted to comment on the parks line item as well, because it just seemed like a blatant place to cut. And if you cut all those CapEx, that's half of the entire raise. Just that CapEx line of 300,000, almost half, right? Because you're talking about 800,000 from the real estate property tax increase. So that's about half. The other question I had about the parks is there's a 20% increase in wages. I believe so.
No, we actually did add the,
That's right. We have an assistant.
we
to
did,
the-
we had.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else in this room, but I'm not making 20% more this year.
No, just so everybody's aware, so we mentioned the WeGo personnel and everything went up 5.75%. Township staff is up 3.2%. This is also including a new person who started as program coordinator for the parks, and she was not in last year's numbers.
That was.
And I'm in error because I said that we hadn't, and I forgot about Jen.
And
So
that
I'm
was,
gonna-
so the staff is how big for the parks?
Two.
Two people.
And well, we've got summer classes and summer
250.
help,
In the wrong business.
which drives it up as well because they get paid more every year.
A lot of the park work is done by
Friends-
Mark
friends-
Miller and the
Oh,
Public
yeah.
Works.
Oh, yeah.
Public Works.
Okay. Just seemed a little extreme to me for that line item, but yeah, it's just the CapEx certainly kicks out. I did also want to touch on what Rob Gianfrido touched on as well. I mean, there's been the case made that, it's been a flat millage for so long, but total assessed valuation has had to grow over the last 20 years. I don't know the exact numbers, but for God's sakes, this community is so different and so built out compared to 20 years ago. The assessed value has to be.
When was the last
I
Judge County assessment?
No,
1990.
I think what he's referring to is that there's been more added to the total assessed
Totals,
valuation.
yes.
Rather
Oh,
than-
Not incremental,
Rather
but
than re.
totals.
You understand that the
revalue.
county hasn't raised their mill rate. I don't know how long.
1996.
No, no, they haven't assessed. They haven't assessed.
No, they,
Right.
no.
It's John.
No, no, no.
They have.
Assessment.
They haven't done a tax.
But there's new build, right?
Yeah.
There's new
Yeah.
build.
Again, that.
And
Rob's-
there's
Rob's
transactions,
for some reason.
right? Don't transactions also? Yeah. With-
Yeah.
No, but that's what you're referring to. The total assessed valuation has gone up, but we get a ratio and a total number every year about this time about what the.
But you
increase-
get the millage on the total assessed value within East Goshen Township.
Yeah, oh, yes, total, 100%.
Right. So I mean, that's
Well,
all money to the
we can
bottom.
look at that trend line over.
Yeah, I'd
over-
be curious.
That's
I
why
mean,
it
because
hasn't changed.
it has to.
It hadn't changed that much.
And doesn't the assessed value change for each transaction? Like if you bought the place for
The assessed
200 now and it's good, it sells for 400 5 years from
That
now, it
doesn't-
doesn't reset?
No,
It doesn't, no.
County has to legally change
County
it,
has
which
to
they have
legally
not
change
done since.
No, and they've
1996.
got a common level ratio, which is
Yes,
like
yes,
39.5%, I think is the latest.
It's
And
39.
interestingly enough, there was a whole period in it occurs every year, but the tax assessment office is taking appeals all the time to lower tax. And
Yeah.
we've had some commercial properties I'm not sure, I can't recall, but that can have a significant burden or a significant change.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
on some of
Bellingham.
those
Was
larger-
it Bellingham or Wellington, Chris?
One of them when it.
Wellington?
Yeah, but so there's those elements. but
Yeah,
the-
Wellington
the
went got
Total
reassessed.
tax reassessment is a big job and I don't
Yes,
think the county
it
wants
hasn't
to
done it.
do it. I think we're at about 0.38 now.
That's a
relative
common
to the
level
market.
ratio?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that fluctuates quite a bit then.
Well, sure, no
Yes.
doubt about it.
Okay.
But that ratio, I think is a bit, it's
Okay.
either 0.38, maybe 0.41.
The millage changes. When you permit a property and it increases in value, your millage goes up. I just got hit 3 times.
Millage doesn't
Not
go up.
millage.
It does go up.
No, it does not go up. Millage is fixed.
Stop,
Millage is
stop.
fixed. Don't.
Rob,
hands
are you
up.
talking?
Millage is fixed. The assessed valuation may go up. The
Yeah.
assessed valuation
Stop.
can go up if you make an improvement to your house, like adding a pool. He's saying the overall aggregate could go up. And Dave has just said, over time, it hasn't changed that much. It hasn't changed that
Yeah.
much. When you're looking at $300 per house and you add houses, it doesn't go up that much.
Now it's gonna go up another 125.
Okay.
So you're telling me that it doesn't go up a lot?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Maybe to you,
Wait.
maybe you're making millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. I'm a retiree. I can't wait for my 8.2. I need
Okay,
it.
no more back and
Um,
forth.
Yeah,
Dave
Let's-
can,
let's-
Dave
let's-
can
it's not
provide
a
a
debate.
trend
Let
line.
Mr. Fonz
Let's
finish.
let Jim finish up here.
Sorry.
Well,
Jim.
since you mentioned it, I wanted to touch on this point too, is that our community has a reasonable amount of people, I believe, that are on fixed incomes. I don't know what the population is here in the township, 18,000 or so. I
18,000.
mean, Hershey's Mill is 3,500 of that, 18%. Then you got Bellingham and Wellington, they're the 2 largest real estate taxpayers right there in the entire township. And they're on fixed incomes. I mean, granted, they're passing that right through. I mean, that is a significant percentage of this township. And I think a 40% jump is just taking it to them.
Well, looking
And,
at the other side of that too, that's one of the reasons why the EIT has been so low for so long, is because the retirement population. I mean, it's over 50% right now, I think.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because going back, it's that I have this 2003 letter in front of me. It says here, only 53% of residents pay the earned income tax, our largest source of revenue. Right here in this letter from 2003. So I don't know what the current percentage is, Dave.
Pretty close.
But it probably stayed that way. So yeah, no doubt about it. Retirees, fixed income.
I mean, it's probably heavier percentage than other communities in this area, other townships. So that can't be ignored. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to make that point. And obviously inflation is being felt profoundly throughout the area, but John mentioned earlier, a recession or some type of downturn is imminent.
Yeah.
Not that it's necessarily first quarter, could be second, third, fourth, but it's coming. I mean, just this week, we've had lots of layoffs announced. Amazon's cutting 10,000 people. The gentleman with the 130 deliveries will be happy, I guess. But Disney, FedEx, the financial sector is going to get hit hard given what the market's doing here. There's a lot of pain to be felt. So I think if you could just keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Zoom room, get ready. We're gonna be coming to you soon. Hi.
My name is Susan Leander and I live at 1539 Sleepy Hollow Lane. Oh, sorry, Sue Leander.
Oh, into the microphone.
Sorry, I thought it was close enough.
There you go.
Sue Leander, 1539 Sleepy Hollow Lane. There's one question. I really looked at the budget. I even emailed you. And there's one thing that nobody has really mentioned yet. For the Milltown, the Milltown Dam Park going forward in the capital improvements budget for 23 and 24, it looks like there's $4.2 million budgeted for a park.
Yeah.
The other thing that hasn't been brought up, and the one thing that was canceled today that we did not talk about, was that conditional, what was it, the hearing that for the new development. And also in connection with that is some trails that were supposed to be interconnected between neighborhoods, my neighborhood being one of them. Is that really necessary, all these trails? That's the one thing that really burns me up is these trails.
There's
We
nothing,
need all these trails.
May I make a
there's nothing in this current budget for trails, just so you know. There's nothing in this current budget for trails, just so you know.
Well, exactly. So then we're gonna add even more to the budget because we want these trails. I don't know that in this Mill Park Dam or the Milltown Dam, is that really necessary? We have East Goshen
Oh, yeah.
Park.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
can't
not,
we pare
that's
down
not to make a park.
for $1 million?
It's not to make a park.
What's that for?
The dam has to be either destroyed or totally rebuilt by order of the
Yeah, I mean,
Department of
our-
Environmental Protection and the
Protection
Army Corps of
and the
Engineers.
Army Corps of Engineers.
don't have a
has come in
choice.
And said we have to do that.
No, can you hold it just?
Well,
No,
what,
no,
with the
we'll-
mandate
We'll
that,
we'll get back to you.
yeah,
Hold
Michelle,
on,
let me,
hold on,
let
Rob,
me
question.
comment, Michelle.
Well,
With the,
let Susan finish.
with the mandate for that park, or
We'll
excuse
go
me,
over that.
well, let me, but just with the mandate that we were required to address that situation with that dam.
I think she's confused.
It was looked at back, I don't know how many years now, that let's try and make it a new park. Because so many of the residents in the area, and there was a Milltown Dam committee of residents in the area that had enjoyed the recreational aspects of it. And now, of course, they're clamoring because it's a mess right now, and we're trying to advance that and bring it back into a condition where it has park-like features, and that was what was envisioned initially that created that estimate. But as I said, as you go over years and it doesn't get done, and in the environment we're in, we're expecting to see public bids come in that are going to be in that $4+ million range. And then we're going to have to make a decision of what we're going to do or how we're going to do it, because there is grant funding involved. And the grants, like everything, have their conditions as to what you're going to do with the grant money they gave you. So it's a bit complex, but is
Can
it
we pare it
necessary?
down though?
It's a
That's my
commitment that was
question.
made to
Can
the
we pare it
residents in
down
that
to
area.
like have plant trees and maybe benches or
Well,
something instead of going?
We would
full-
love, we would
full
love to
force?
pare it down, but unfortunately, there was a plan that was submitted. And unfortunately, that plan, loose plan that was submitted has to be now followed through on. And of course, it was submitted in 2020 and prices were very different in February of 2020. Unfortunately, we have to now follow what our plan was going to be. We don't have a choice. It's required of us by the Army Corps of Engineers. We're not allowed to put the dam back, unfortunately, because it's a nationwide initiative to allow the water to flow as it once flowed before. Of course, that was before development. And so that's a problem. And we just didn't have any choice. This was dictated to
Well, how
us.
about the trails? That's not dictated,
Well,
is it?
The trails, that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And when you
what about this interconnecting
Well, let me
neighborhood
mention
trails that they're?
Let me mention that. We didn't get a chance to talk about it tonight, and I happen to live up in that neighborhood. What we're looking for probably with the Miller property, which is the subject of the proposed development, is simply to obtain an easement for a future pedestrian access or pedestrian access for the future. So it's there, whether it's your generation or the next generation, it is a place marker. Now, I will tell you that in the neighborhood that I live in, it's contiguous to the Miller property. And to the west, we have the Goshen Downs, and to the west is Charter Chase. We have two informal paths, footpaths that connect the two neighborhoods. They're not more, the one is maybe 75 yards, the other is maybe 50 yards. And they are one is mulch and the other is just grass. And people can walk informally. There's no maintenance associated with it. There've been no incidents. It's connecting neighborhoods with neighbors. Nothing more formalized than that, nothing more manifest. And that's it. And so with this new development, all we're doing is trying to see if we can obtain an easement for a future pedestrian access that's there. It's no different than a paper road in a subdivision.
Is it because are we trying to connect the trail to the Hershey Mill Park, the new Hershey Mill Dam?
No, I
Park?
mean, you'd have access to it.
And where would that be? What is the plan? Is
Well,
that
you have to
going
come and
down-
see. I'm not going to we're talking about the
This-
budget, but
Is it going through Hershey Mill Estates or is it going?
well,
down
no, it
Hershey Mill
would
Road?
stop, right? It would stop as part of the development. It would just give access to someone within the new development to be able to walk safely down to Hershey's Mill Road. If they want to cross the street and walk over to Hershey's Mill Estates, they can. If they want to walk over to Goshen Downs, they can. It's just a neighborhood, soft, low impact footpaths more than it is trails. That's what that's
And
about.
that's,
So
and
let's-
that's actually, that's gonna be for that other conditional
Yeah.
use
My,
hearing.
my
So come back in
suggestion,
January for
my
that.
suggestion is, let's maybe forget the trails. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
because
And there's
obviously,
nothing, for the record,
obviously
there's
people
nothing
can make
budgeted.
their own trails. You're saying they already did.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah.
You know,
And there's nothing budgeted for this year at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
not
I mean,
for Trails.
Let me tell you the irony. Can I do that? Because this makes me laugh. When the Futurist Committee set the poll out, it was overwhelmingly favorable to have what
Connectors.
we call connector trails. Everybody wanted it. Then we came, and this is not directed at you, Sue. This is for everybody. We came to this project and somebody said, wait a minute, that trail's gonna go like across my backyard. All of a sudden, they don't want it. They don't want the trails if they're in their backyard. They want the trails if they're in somebody else's backyard, but if they're in your backyard, absolutely not. So trails,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not pushing them.
We're
too
not
hard.
talking about that tonight. So
Yeah.
is there anything else that you want to bring to us?
I'm just concerned as to how we got to the point where we're at. Because, you know, Paoli Pike Trail, that was like $1 million almost. You know, I'm just adding the numbers up from the budget that I saw from the funds. I mean, that's a lot of money.
It's more than that.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure it was. And
Well,
I
it's
was
a lot
only
more than
adding
that.
2021 and 22, what I saw in the budget, because I don't have all
Lot
the
more than that.
information.
There was,
But, and
much
it's the
more.
same thing with Hershey Mill Dam. That was over $1 million.
And we didn't have any choice on that one either.
Yeah.
And we
I
did, we
mean,
did
it's
get a
just-
substantial grant
He-
to
he-
offset that.
Here's the good news, though.
Hmm.
The two dams, we were ordered to change the two dams by the Army Corps of Engineers,
Mhm.
and then the state DEP jumped into it and started making us jump through hoops. The good news is I'm not aware of any other dams in the township.
We
So
only have two.
no, honestly, we
Yeah.
may
Yeah,
be,
let's not find any.
once we get past it, we may be good. I don't know.
So,
Yeah,
so
let it
do you have any
go.
other
Let it go.
concerns, Susan?
Just going forward, you know, if we could stay away from spending more money. I mean, I'm concerned, what I'm concerned about is we raised the tax and we have some significant debt too. I noticed.
We do.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
It's really significant debt.
Right. No doubt
And
about it.
I'm just concerned that, you know, that's going to be out of control and we are not going to be able to keep taxes at a relatively cheap, it's going to keep going up. That's what I'm concerned about. And I'm sure everybody else is concerned about that.
Thank
When,
you.
when you see large budgeted items like I'm seeing and the debt, I'm thinking, whoa, there's no way you can sustain that.
Yep.
And
Thank
then
you.
we will have increases every year.
Thank you for.
Yep.
your
Thank you.
comments.
Thank you,
Sue.
Sue.
I'm going to take some questions from the Zoom room. And so thank you for being patient, everybody in the Zoom room. I'm sorry that it's taken a little while.
See a hand raised. There we go.
Here's a hand.
And we have Tacoma.
Hi, could you please state your name?
Yes, Tacoma Bethea, Cider Knoll.
Can you spell your last name for the record, please?
B as in Bravo, ETHEA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to say that I looked at the reason why I asked you to put up that taxes, the proposed tax increase, because I wanted to compare it to the actual cost of gas that I saw at 5 points today. Now, looking at those numbers, if you break it down by monthly, it's actually the first figure would be less than a tank of gas. The other figures would range from 2 tanks of gas to about 3, almost 4 tanks of gas. Now, in terms of taxes, that's relatively decent. In terms of the way you physically manage this community, it's relatively decent. In terms of response times for EMS services, you guys are doing really good. So if there's anyone that, you know, is hinging on whether they should raise it or not raise it as somebody that has to pay it, I'd be inclined to agree to pay it because of what I see and what I have seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Jane.
Hi.
Hi, could you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Jane Joyce, 704 Red Maple Drive. I just,
Hang on, can you hold on for 1 second, please? Can you-
Jane, hold on
I
a
just want to
second.
try to get your volume up. Hold on. Kenny, can you shut that door for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on, Jane.
Hold on.
Okay,
Okay, there you go.
All right, welcome.
That's better.
all right. Jane Joyce, Red Maple Drive. Couple of points. We moved here 28 years ago, and the real estate agent said to us, yes, we do have an earned income tax, but we don't have a real estate tax. Surprise, we got a real estate tax that has gone nowhere but up, even though it's low. And in a household where we are on a fixed income at this point in time, you know, every little bit helps or hurts, depending on which way it goes. So, and with all the increased building and whatever, someone else mentioned this, you know, you have more taxpayers paying. So there's an increase right then and there. And, you know, everybody's got a budget, whether it's fixed income or it's not a fixed income. Everybody's got a budget. And they're trying to juggle all the things that they have put in their place. Yes, you guys have done a great job, I've heard, and I agree with most of what's been said along those lines. But, you know, I think that everybody has to live within their budget this time. This is not a time. I agree with the previous speaker. This is not the time. Whatever it takes to live within our budget at this point in time until things stabilize on a national level, I think we really need to hold it there. And thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jane.
Jane.
Is there anybody else in the Zoom room with any comments or questions?
This is Susan Hudson. I live at 1631 Bow Tree Drive in Westchester. And just wanted to reiterate what people are saying. It sounds like to me from listening to everything that there are ways that you guys can get this budget down a bit. And I think you need to be fiscally responsible as we are trying to be in our households as well. And that I don't think now is the time because people are predicting we haven't seen the worst of whatever we're going through from a country standpoint and inflation. So I think we're all willing to help you guys find areas where we could cut costs. So that's the first thing. And my last thing is that when something is made, put in the Daily Times or in the newspaper, will it be a refined budget or would it be this one?
The actual ad will not have, I mean, that would be a very long ad. So the ad will just say it is available for review at the township building and then as well on the website. If anybody wants me to print out their own, I'll be happy to do that as well. So the actual budget itself will not be in there. It's a notice that the budget is approved for preliminary passage and that it could be reviewed by residents now. So it would be the one on the table if it is passed tonight for review for at least 20 days. In this case, it'll be closer to 30.
So if it's not passed tonight, then we would have the bill, then you guys will go back and refine where you can?
I'm just talking about procedure here. That's up to the board. But if it is not passed tonight, we will need to pass it either next Tuesday, the 22nd, or the Tuesday after that, the 29th, in order to make the deadline before the end of the year. Legally, we need to pass a final budget before December 31st, 11:59 p.m. I don't necessarily want to be here then, but that is legally what we are obligated to do. And we are obligated to pass a preliminary budget in order for public inspection.
That does not mean we cannot change it. It just means that we pass it to the public. There are parameters that we have to follow. We're not allowed to increase the budget by more than 10% overall. Right. Or any line item by
25%.
Increase it by 25%.
Or you
increase it by 25%.
No, it's just increase
Just
actually.
increase, okay.
And you would have to re-advertise for a total of 10
Right.
days at that point. But yeah, Michelle's correct. And hypothetically, board members can vote for preliminary budget and then not vote for the final. It happens all the time. So that is a possibility. But yeah, if we don't pass it tonight, we have to pass it before the end of the month on a Tuesday.
Okay, I can't, maybe just for confidence in you guys, it would be good if you didn't pass it tonight. Take a look at it, because I think the chairwoman has some great ideas on where things could be cut. And I think it's just a good faith effort. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other questions on the Zoom room? Please stay there.
Edward Solzar.
Edward,
Good evening. Can you hear me?
we can.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, the one thing I did look at the capital plan. It seems like it's heavily loaded for 2020. And then there's kind of it really drops off in 2024 on out. And I think the prior gentleman talked about the amount of reserves that you have in the capital reserve accounts. So my thought is, first, do all those projects in 2023 have to be done as scheduled? Can any of those be moved out? And if that's the case, or moved out or canceled or reduced, how does that affect your budget increase requirement? And then the second thing I was interested in was if you could publish the kind of department by department reduction to the budget from last year to this year, or the 2023 proposed. I mean, I'm assuming you went to each of the department heads and said, how can you reduce your expenses going into 2023?
Right.
I mean, you mentioned reducing the payment to the Malvern Library, reducing the volunteer luncheon, but it would be nice to see a slide that itemizes that by department.
And that actually is up online right now.
I'd also share with you that under the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement program summary, which is page 2 of tonight's handout or presentation, under funding source for any of the years shown, 23 through 27, the funding source is not from the general fund. It's from either the capital reserve fund, the sewer capital reserve fund, a separate enterprise fund from the others, grants, the series 2017 bonds, and the infrastructure sustainability fund. So it's not coming directly out of the general fund, which is the subject of the particularly of the budget tonight and relative to the specific proposed tax millage increase. And what you see on the capital improvement program summary under funding source, as you look from 23 through 27, the available funds go from, in 2023, $6.2 million, in 2027 down to $450,000. It's drained at that point in time. So there's got to be some sustainability, and that's another one of the challenges. So I just wanted to specify, be a little more specific about the funding source, and none of these funding sources are coming directly out of the general fund.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I understand that a little better. But I guess in terms of the increase that you're proposing, the 900,000, well, actually, the 784,000 for the tax increase. You know, as a prior gentleman mentioned, if you look at the parks line item, that's a significant increase year on year. So the question would be, you know, where's the, so to speak, fat in the budget that we can attack and get that increase down? Because this increase will come, you know, will not stop. Will never be retired. It's just going to get built in, and it's going to be carried forward year after year. So I understand that you don't have, there's no more new development, and we've kind of reached we've built out the township. And so I see the problem. But just kind of want to see where each of the departments have done their analysis and reduced their expenses going from 22 to 23.
And Dave did say that that is available online right now.
All of the detail is available online. It's should be the general fund detail. It's basically by department. If you scroll through, you can see general government. Then there'll be public safety. Then there's a different breakdown, which is Parks and Rec would probably be, or Public Works is responsible for the sanitation, all the storm sewers. They overlap in multiple areas, and then Parks and Rec, et cetera.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any other questions or can I move on to the next person?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Ma'am in the room, please. Go ahead and bring that microphone down to you.
Good evening. My name is Wendy Lee Wall and I live at Hershey's Mill. I'm a senior. My address is 443 Eaton Way. The reason that I'm up here speaking is our HOA at Hershey's Mill takes care of our trash, recycling, water, storm management, sewers. So I think everybody should be very appreciative that the approximately 3,000 people there are not involved with any of your costs. And also too, even though the school taxes are separate from your organization, none of us have kids living there. Of course, they're grandkids, but they're the responsibility of their parents. So we are not involved with your trash, sewers, recycling, storm management, snow removal, or
Roads.
any of that stuff. Our master association and our HOA takes care of everything. So I think everybody should be very appreciative of Hershey's Mill because we're contributing a lot of money to East Goshen.
Hasn't gone unnoticed by me for almost 40 years, and I did used to work with a developer there. So I am very cognizant of both the master association and the villages
We give a lot of money, so therefore, I don't think that the 40% increase should apply to Hershey's Mill.
Yeah, well, I respect that. Of course, you know, it was interesting. I kind of knew the answer, but I asked through our manager, our township solicitor, if due to hardship, the township was able to, upon demonstration, reduce or lower the cost of the property tax to those who might qualify. Regrettably, and I did know the answer, but I wanted to hear it from him, that the tax has to be applied uniformly so that there is no, we can't segment it out and break it down according to a demographic or a hardship situation. So that's just the rules and the law that we have to go under.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
No, the refuse and recycling service is what we, and sewer. Of course, you have the Green Hill Sewer Association to provide your sewer there with spray application, but the sewer, public sewer here and the refuse and recycling is based on the users and the fees they pay. So you don't pay into that, to that, you don't pay a trash or refuse. That's a separate bill that residents receiving it in the township to pay as a user fee for that service. Same with sewer. So you really don't pay that one.
So Cody, you wanted to
But you have helped out a lot. There's no doubt about it. And that's just the way Hershey's Mill was set up. Oh, I know it.
Wendy, I love Hershey's Mill. My wife's godfather's right there, lives in Hershey's Mill. One thing I do want to remind people is that our EMS and our WeGo do cover Hershey's Mill.
Yep.
And yeah, exactly. And that is 60% of what the increase for next year. So
Every year we pay $50 per house.
Yes.
For the fire department, for the ambulance.
mhm.
So there's like 3,000.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's good to know. I
Well,
wasn't aware of that.
The thing is though, too, most of our calls for EMS are directed to Hershey's Mill.
Hershey's Mill or Bellingham or
Yeah.
Wellington.
No,
I mean, that
no,
constitutes a large.
the largest portion of it is
Yeah,
actually Hershey's Mill.
But your point is
So
well
I
taken.
think we have another question from online. Tacoma, is it?
Yes, please. Yep.
Let me, Tacoma, can you unmute? No.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now we
there
can-
you go.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this earlier, and I was also
okay.
going. I meant to ask this when I asked earlier. Has the township considered any backup or alternate plans? Because if those if those railroad unions strike, there are currently three, the third union actually, I think, is not going with that contract ahead. How will that affect the actual proposed budgets of all the stuff that we plan on doing? My concern is that, based on,
We couldn't hear the beginning part of your question. I'm sorry.
Start it over, restate your question from the beginning.
okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm stating the issue before I state the question. First, the issue in terms of what I'm saying is that I understand you have proposed budget and it actually increased millage on the individual units, et cetera. And I'm okay with that. My question is that what will be the effect if we don't put this plan into play and the railway unions actually go on strike and we have to pay more, even more than we're actually calculating right now for the proposed goods and services that we need for the township?
I'm not sure I understand the correlation between rail service and the strike and the township fees comes out. I'm not.
And when you build everything that's built, most of the stuff that gets built has come in through rail, right?
Oh, via the rail system.
Correct.
Supply chain issues.
Correct. So so my question is, if we have supply chain issues, right now we're asking for a modest increase. What would be the cost if we don't put this modest increase in place and we have supply chain issues and it adversely affects the proposed
We've already seen, and we with trucks.
It's a very good point. It's just a very hard thing to predict, what that impact might be. Obviously, it would go up. I don't know if it would go up 5%, 10%, 30%. It depends on how long the strike lasts and what services are actually disrupted, what materials. But it's a very fair point.
The only
We haven't built
comment,
that in.
the comment I'll make on that is anytime, we talk about capital projects a lot here. Anytime those get delayed, you could add to the cost down the road. So that is,
We also do put in contingencies for most of these. Doesn't look like a lot of the 5-year-old budgets did.
Right.
But we at least put in 15 to 20, sometimes 30% contingencies, realizing that if it's over multiple years, that the costs are going to go up.
Very tough to assign a dollar amount to that question though, and I apologize.
Good question, but we can't give a real specific answer on it.
All right, we're winding down here. And so I'm going to ask Rob to come on up. If you have another question, go ahead.
One question.
Yeah.
I know, going back to the EMS and,
Microphone, please. I'm sorry.
I know we're going back to the EMS. A lot of the township employees work, are volunteer firefighter,
Yes, they are.
volunteer. Does the township get paid? So when one of Mark Miller's guys leaves and goes on a call, does he clock out? Or are they getting paid to do that call and then come back? I'm just looking at.
They're on
is
the
that a
clock.
cost that
They're on the clock. We're basically eating that cost for Goshen Fire Company.
Yeah, but
it
saves lives.
I understand that. I mean, how much is that? So no one pays that. So that's also contributing to the firefighters and the EMS. Basically, it's a soft cost, if you want to say. So
Yep.
if, fiscally, we're donating, just say $500,000 to them, but we're also donating how much money and time that.
How often does it happen?
More often than you would think.
Yeah, it
I
happens.
mean, they have the fire truck, they park the fire truck here.
But many jobs are not going that long.
No,
No, it's usually they run
quick
out
back.
and if they're not needed, they come back. So it's, I don't know.
I mean, I would
45
say we
minutes.
have conversations about EMS and creative ways to be able to have volunteers.
Yeah.
This is one of the more creative ways I've seen throughout the county, so.
And it actually is a cost savings and
But
truly it's life saving.
It's a good question, though, to break that out and
Yeah.
understand what it is, because we do provide a monthly stipend to the volunteer firefight, to the public works who are volunteer firefighters. I think it's $100 a month or something that we provide to them to support the volunteer fire. If you're not aware of it, the volunteer fire model that was set up by Ben Franklin is in great free fall. the inability to get volunteers to commit to the time and the training necessary, let alone the risk in these years, such that Goshen Fire Company now, I think we have 12 career firefighters. So
Yes.
we've been transitioning to what seems to be inevitable, particularly in areas like this where the cost of housing, et cetera, is beyond many young volunteers. They can't afford it. One of the interesting things is, and a little aside, Goshen Fire Company has been trying to do some improvements to their facility to create some housing for volunteers so that they have an ability to be on the premises at different times. They've done that at the Westchester Fire Department with I think it's the Fame Fire Company down near the university. They put in, when they did their addition, they put in some housing that tries to cultivate volunteers and to try and improve, but we're moving towards a paid system. And so
That's a long discussion for another.
But this
Yeah,
gentleman had
I
a very,
haven't
he had a
seen
very
it
good
yet.
point, which I've thought about before too. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to get in front of the board and Goshen Fire coming up for, say, the next one. So they get X amount of dollars this year as a contribution. We're also passing fire alarm fees to them as
Right.
well, up to $15,000 a year. And we're having our volunteer guys drive the truck, man the truck, clean the truck, take it over there, and do that service. So
And,
we're contributing more than just dollars.
and they don't apply for grants, which is worse.
Don't even,
well, that's a conversation we're gonna have to.
Yeah.
We do have another.
I just want to say,
So-
Rob, ZZ Top needs a bass player.
I have another question in
That's
the
good.
Zoom room and
Good
we're
comment, good question.
kind of wrapping this up. It's,
We have
Pretty late.
iPhone guests. I don't know.
hello there, iPhone guest. Please state your name.
Hi, I think that's me. My name is Enrico Mazza and I'm at 1612 Heron Lane.
Hey,
And
Enrico.
hi, just a couple of comments. I don't really, I understand the hesitancy of using the reserves. Number one, I haven't really gotten a clear answer on that. And I am curious, how long have we had this reserve and has it increased or decreased over the year? And also, when would you think it's a good time to use those reserves, if not now?
It's a great question. I don't think that we should hesitate to, in certain situations, use those reserves. We've built up the reserves over a period of time and they are going down. We have dipped into those reserves at different times over the years. Maybe Derek or Dave can give us a little bit of, we don't want to dip.
Yeah, well, I guess the question, I guess
Most of the reserves came about 10 years ago, maybe between 10 and 15 years ago.
I think it peaked about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then it's been going
been going down.
since.
Not
Yeah.
substantially down,
Right.
but I mean, if we're talking about general fund and operating reserve, the biggest take out of there was we split operating reserve and we put it to infrastructure. So that instead of using it for operational continuity of the township, we could actually spend it towards Bowtree Pond,
Right.
Mary Dell, all of these kind of projects that we have and not use general fund tax dollars, which are additional since they were already paid in. So that was the thoughts behind
Yeah,
setting that up.
we did essentially free up that and reallocate it.
1.25 million. Yeah.
Yeah, and what we originally had was an operating reserve fund that supported the general fund in the event of really a calamity of great proportion where our operations would be compromised. And it's been in place for a long time. The board, it was last year or the year before, I guess it was last year, we discussing the aspects of infrastructure, the aging infrastructure, the capitalized items that can fail. And I'm not talking sewer at this point. I'm talking things like a culvert in the road, or in our case, we have a number of, essentially they're stormwater facilities, but they're ponds that the township owns. Mary Dell is a great example. If you haven't been to Mary Dell, take a look at what essentially Public Works and the township did to restore that pond. And it's not just the aesthetics, but its function. And so this infrastructure sustainability fund, we took half of the money out of the operating fund, and we're actually going to be using that this year for one of the Bowtree ponds to restore that. So we have moved some of those dollars into it. But again, some of these funds and some of the fund balances are very targeted. And it's not like we could move capital reserve funds from our sewer fund, which is already under great stress, to our general fund. That would be not proper, wouldn't be even legal, I don't think.
No, if you looked at our current general fund surplus, that's the fund balance sitting in there now, as of October, and you add in what we have now in operating reserves, it's about $7 million. And that's probably about, say Downingtown, Coatesville happened where they got wiped out, everything got flooded, they couldn't take payments or do anything. That's probably 5 to 7 months worth of expenses that we could absorb before we had to go out for debt or anything like that. And that's the purpose of them. On top of that, it doesn't mean that we can't borrow minimal amounts from time to time. Depends on your definition of minimal. And then also those surplus funds in that existing fund balance allow us to have our AAA bond rating, which also gives us a substantial advantage when we do go out for debt. So like the 2017 bond, we got about 1% better on that money, which if it was only 6 million, it'd be about $800,000 over the 20 years. So it does make a big impact over that time span to be able to borrow at a lower rate.
Okay, Enrico, did that answer your question?
It did. I'll just make one more comment. You don't have to answer, but it's just a comment. Early on, there was a lot of comparison to the millage rates of neighboring towns, but I think if the person that brought that up, I don't remember who it was, but on the board.
It was me, Enrico, Mike, yeah.
Okay, so my comment is just this. If you want to use that as your argument, in fairness, you should also present what their reserves are and what their expenses are and what their projected deficits. I think just to take their millage is not presenting the whole picture. I think I'd be curious to what their reserves are. Are they also keeping the same amount or are they less? And is there projected deficit? I think we need the whole picture.
Yeah, that's
really
a really
interesting.
good point, Enrico. And again, as I said earlier, comparison on particularly on just on the surface, it can be very toxic. It was a reference point I wanted to make, but I'll give you one example because I was there for 30 years. And one of the municipalities in the Westchester Area School District that I referenced was East Bradford Township. East Bradford Township has struggled, and if you were to look at their balance sheets and their budgets and their fund balances right now, the viability of their capital reserve fund it continues to be a great challenge. They're half the population, a little bit more than half the population of where we are here in East Goshen. But their reserves are very much depleted for capital items. They've deferred projects, necessary projects, including culvert replacements, important bridge improvements over the years. While it's a great open space township, now that they've acquired all the open space, it costs money to maintain and to steward. And they're seeing the stresses of taking tax dollars out and preserving open space, and that tax deferred dollars with greenness does have a cost. But East Bradford is one example. I could tell you more stories about and more factual information about the struggles they're having. And they've increased their millage now twice over the last three or 4 years. They were at 1 mil for about 4 or 5 years, and now in the last 2 or 3 years, they've gone up another 0.75. So that's one example. And it's a solid community. It's a beautiful community, but they've got real challenges, and they're probably looking at further tax increases. I don't know what some of our neighbors are doing as well, but I know they're facing similar challenges, Enrico. But that was a very good point. It was a topical. It was on the surface rather, but there's more to that story, and capital reserves and fund balances tell a deeper picture, and didn't provide that. So thanks for that comment.
Thank you, Enrico. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and questions. It's been very eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people, and I appreciate that. And as there are no other comments at this time, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of simply passing the budget to the public to allow them to comment on it and review it for the next almost 30 days. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Reluctantly, aye.
No.
Thank you, John. Okay, the motion passes. The budget will go to the public for review. And
Just a procedural note, so December 6th, we cannot pass the budget, so
right,
the earliest would be December 20th, but I will have, based on the conversation tonight, I will probably at least have a draft tax resolution for review on December 6th, and no vote that night, but at least to review a draft of it for the board. Thank you.
okay, thank you. And I'm gonna ask for the line item budget extermination to be increased a little tiny bit, maybe. I have a little bit of a problem with bugs up here.
They're coming
today.
in, they're coming inside. It's getting cold.
Yeah, I had a few over
It's,
here
it's
too. Were
been
you
a problem.
passing those over
Michelle
here?
got one.
It's like,
Yeah, we have it, we're doing some.
I would like to thank the 7 people who have
Endured.
Stuck it out.
endurance to stick it out.
And look at all the Zoomer people though. We still have
Intrepid
a lot of
you are.
Well,
ones
yeah,
there.
but they're sitting at home with the TV on in their
Still, thank
in
you for
their
sticking it out.
comfortable chairs and everything.
Well, I'm glad we don't have our meetings on
So
Monday night,
there-
otherwise
there's-
nobody might have.
there's
been. I
good
don't know,
news.
Eagles or the budget, I think. the
We're
budget's more
almost
important.
done. So as far as standing issues are concerned, there's nothing new to report on Hershey's Mill Dam project. Milltown Dam continues to be,
I would like to repeat my request to have the Hershey's Mill Estates sewer line added
Oh,
to
yes.
the list of.
Yeah.
things
Oh, yeah,
that
I will do
we're
that.
yes, do
reporting.
you
I'll
do
do
you have an update on that for us?
Yeah, that's actually advertised for bid, and bid closes December something. I don't-
Woo-hoo. All right, that's
I have to
great.
check with Mark, but
Yeah,
it's
municipal
already
authority
advertised.
for that
Yeah,
Monday.
it's already
Excellent.
And,
advertised.
do we have the update on Milltown Dam at all?
Waiting on DCNR for the bid documents. I contacted him last Friday and did not hear anything yet.
Okay, I
so.
guess we'll
But-
get on that. phone
But on
number.
Hershey's Mill Dam, they were working today and yesterday on finishing some of the final
We have
landscaping.
a meeting November 17th,
Punch
2
list.
days for punch list.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's, though, it's in at
Excellent.
98%
I
state.
want the phone number for who I have to chase with this Milltown Dam.
My vote on that one.
I'll tell you his name publicly, Alex from
Michelle will
DCNR.
get them.
Alex, okay,
What do you
well,
have
you're
to
gonna
say?
give me his
I'm waiting for the.
phone number.
Any other?
Okay, is there any other public comment at this time? There are no liaison reports or correspondence, and so Cody.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Every second, those in favor vote of out of here.